The missing person posters started appearing before anyone went missing. At first, we thought it was some kind of mistake, even a childish prank. But then we started recognizing the faces. Sarah from the coffee shop, Oliver, who walks his dogs every morning. People who were still very much alive, still going about their daily routines. Completely unaware, their faces were plastered on telephone poles and trees, with the word missing on them. The dates on the posters were always exactly 7 days in the future. And 7 days later, without fail, they would vanish. No trace, no explanation, just empty spaces where people used to be. This is just one type of story that you might hear by Michael Alexander on Strange Tales and Unusual Circumstances, where the impossible becomes inevitable and the ordinary becomes terrifying. Some stories are too strange to ignore. For our fifth strange tale, which blends mystery and the cosmic unknown, is titled The Great Canadian Stowaway. This unusual circumstance of drifting between realms and the terrifying possibilities of infinite realities within our world is never too far away. Listening discretion is advised.
The Great Canadian Stowaway by Michael Alexander.
Beware, for it will feel like a dream within a dream. If the realm begins to spill over, you will be left to question the very fabric of your reality. What once seemed certain will unravel, and you may never again be able to trust what you see, hear, or feel. The boundaries between worlds are fragile, and the consequences of crossing them are far more terrifying than you can imagine. A familiar shadow waits for the eclipse, for what is sown must be reaped by the inheritor.
A passage by Father McNaught, also known as the Son of Nobody, the Church of the Other Realms of Our Existence.
Chapter 1. The Death of Joni.
Father Patrick's voice was faint but steady as he recited Joni's last rites. Go forth, Christian soul, from this world, in the name of God, the Almighty Father, who created you in the name of Jesus Christ, Son of God, who suffered for you in the name of the Holy Spirit, who was poured out upon you. Go forth, faithful Christian. The long-term care facility's walls were painted in a dull, sterile beige, a color that did little to bring comfort to those inside. The room was small, furnished with a bed, a dresser topped with old family photos, and a small table beside a recliner. Father Patrick stood at the foot of the bed, reading from the Bible. Joni, frail and gaunt, lay motionless beneath the sheets. Her long, thinning red hair spread out against the pillow like a fragile halo. At her side, and clutching her hand, stood her granddaughter Alexis. She was a spitting image of Joni when she was in her younger years. Alexis was in her late 30s, thin and undeniably beautiful, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders. Her husband Leland stood beside her in silence. His business attire was only slightly rumpled from the long hours spent at the bedside. Others from Joni's immediate family also gathered in the room, their expressions solemn, and their hands clasped in silent prayer. Dorothy, a caregiver at the home, stood just off to the side. She was a plump woman in her late 50s, dressed in her standard nurse's garments, her face lined with the wear of years spent tending to the dying. Father Patrick finished his passage and made the sign of the cross. I'll let you and your family be alone, he said gently. Joni's voice, weak but determined, cut through the hush. Stay here with us, Father. He hesitated only for a moment before complying, reopening the Bible and beginning another passage. As he spoke, Joni stirred. Her sunken eyes widened, a spark of life flickering within them. Her gaze lifted, focusing past Father Patrick, and past everyone in the room. Something unseen had entered. Father Patrick paused, glancing over his shoulder. There was nothing, yet Joni's expression shifted, a smile spreading across her withered lips. From her perspective, a blinding light had begun to manifest in the room, pulsating, its brilliance forming the outline of a woman. Moments later, the apparition of Joni's best friend, Gloria, appeared young, with short brown hair, glasses perched on her nose, and carrying a camera around her neck. Beside Gloria stood Richard. He was in his early 20s, with short, neatly parted hair, and a thin, dark mustache that, paired with his crisp white shirt, dark necktie, and tailored gabardine trousers, gave him the air of a first mate on a transatlantic steamer. Jerry, a man accustomed to the engine room, stood beside him. His face was smudged with perpetual grease, and he wore heavy, dark denim overalls and a gray cotton work shirt that clung to his thick frame. Charles, a Native American in his late 20s, was tall and lean. His long black hair fell in loose waves down his back, contrasting with his sturdy, well-worn blue jeans and a plain light-colored t-shirt. Around his neck, he wore a simple but striking necklace of smooth, carved bone beads, centered with a single polished piece of turquoise, a constant, subtle reminder of his ancestry. Finally, Javier the busker completed the group. A rugged-looking Mexican man in his 30s, his deep-set eyes held a distant look. He was dressed in tattered, sun-bleached cotton trousers and a frayed button-down shirt, his worn leather boots scuffed from years on the road. A battered acoustic guitar was strapped across his back, and a menacing-looking knife rested securely in a sheath at his hip. They appeared just as they had all those years ago. Joni reached out to them, her arms stretching forward as if to embrace them all at once. And then, just as quickly, her arms fell to her sides. The smile never left her face as the steady beep of the heart monitor turned into a flat, unwavering tone. Rain fell in steady sheets over the cemetery. Black umbrellas dotted the burial plot where Joni's family and friends gathered. The weight of loss hung heavy in the air, a solemn punctuation to Father Patrick's recitation of the Book of Common Prayer. While the priest recited, a crow landed on a nearby tree branch, its black eyes watchful, unblinking. Embedded on its breast was a white marking resembling a clergy collar. Later, as the funeral service came to an end and the guests slowly made their way to their vehicles, Alexis and her husband approached the town car. Meanwhile, Dorothy approached in a hurry, her plastic rain bonnet glistening under the stormy sky. She stopped just before them, slightly out of breath. "I almost forgot to give you this," she said, passing Alexis a slightly crumpled and dampened envelope. "We found it hidden in her room." The crow that had still been watching let out a low caw as it flew low over Alexis, before perching on another branch, shaking off the rain from its feathers. Inside the envelope was an address and a single key to a storage locker. The contents of the storage locker were forgotten for several months before being unexpectedly rediscovered. The self-storage facility was nearly empty. The air was thick with dust, and the distant hum of flickering fluorescent lights echoed throughout the enclosure. Alexis traced the numbers on the doors with her fingertips until she reached the unit. The key slid into the lock with a soft click, and as she lifted the door open, only 2 large boxes sat in the center of the floor, their presence stretching back who knows how long.
Chapter 2. Still Photoed Memories.
Later that evening, and in the spare room of her home, Alexis sat on the floor, a glass of wine in one hand, and hundreds of scattered photographs surrounding her. The 2 boxes from the storage unit had been emptied, their contents sprawled before her. An old, muddy Duluth pack sat nearby, its worn fabric telling the untold story. Among the photographs, she found one of her grandmother at age 21. She was young and beautiful, her curly red hair cascading over her shoulders as she posed in a floral dress. Alexis smiled. Even now, her grandmother's beauty was undeniable. She picked up 2 newspaper clippings, the edges yellowed with age. In the photographs, Joni stood in front of a plane, dressed in a jumpsuit and parachute pack. "Anything for a thrill. Just a let down. 2,200-foot leap lacks oomph for co-ed." Read the first headline. The second article was read. Parachute jump fails to thrill SC co-ed. Alexis chuckled, taking another sip of wine before she reached for another stack of photos. But as she turned one over, her smile faded. A homeless woman stood on the street, yelling at no one in particular, and yet, in the corner of the photograph, barely noticeable, a shimmering figure reached toward her. A memory stirred, and the long-forgotten moment resurfaced. 25 years earlier, while walking down Skid Row, Los Angeles. A 15-year-old Alexis stood beside Joni with her camera, watching as the homeless woman laughed and conversed with someone or something no one else could see. Joni's passion was photography. She loved capturing things in the moment. People always think they're crackpots when they see them talking to nobody, like they should be locked away in the madhouse, Joni stated. She raised her camera and took another picture. Then, with quiet certainty, she continued. The question is, what happens if she's actually talking to somebody? Joni lifted her camera once again, the lens capturing the moment, just as the homeless woman sat down on a bench and withdrew her arm abruptly. She suddenly grew agitated, thrashing as if something unseen had grabbed hold of her. Her distressed cries turned heads, but the world around her carried on, blind to whatever tormented her. Maybe her mind is just open to see what we can't, Joni continued, lowering the camera as she turned to her granddaughter. There are different worlds all around us. Alexis frowned. How do you know that, Grandma? Joni smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. Experience. She winked before snapping one last photo. Months later, Alexis sat across from Joni at a chessboard park. The crisp air carried the distant sounds of birds and rustling leaves. Nearby, a homeless man engaged in a heated conversation with himself. Alexis hesitated, watching him before turning back to the chessboard. She tapped her fingers on the table, waiting for Joni to make her move. Grandma, do you think he's talking to somebody? Joni glanced at the man. No, he's just a crazy person. She answered, and they both started to giggle. Alexis had now come out of the memory and began flipping through the old photographs again. In her hands, she held an image of Joni at 21, standing aboard a ship, holding a life ring that read, Vancouver. Her expression was defiant, her middle finger raised at the camera. Smiling, Alexis took another sip of wine and reached for more photos when a sudden crash of a window breaking made her jump. Startled, she had also knocked over her glass, the red wine spilling on the floor. A crow had flown straight into the glass, breaking it. Shit! She set the photos down hastily, but as she did, she didn't notice the wine pooling over a group photo of Joni, Gloria, Richard, and Jerry. The liquid spread across the image, darkening in a way that eerily resembled pooling blood. Retrieving a dustpan, broom, and a pair of yellow dish gloves, she exited through her back door and made her way to the crow. Approaching, she becomes hesitant, now inching closer step by step towards the bird. When she approached, she noticed the crow had a distinctive marking resembling a clergy collar. She sighs, an expression that she's not enthusiastic about the cleanup at hand, but she was also saddened by the accidental death. Turning the broom around, she pokes the bird to make sure it is actually dead. The last thing she wanted was the crow to regain consciousness and begin attacking. Clearly to her, the bird was dead, so she swept it up and proceeded to toss it in the garbage can located not far from where she stood. Alexis cringed after disposing of the dead creature. As she walked away, she heard a thud. Turning, she hears it multiple times, and the pail begins to violently shake before the lid flies off and the crow exits. Alexis jumped back, almost having a heart attack as she watched the bird fly away. She stepped back into the room and froze. Shards of glass were littered across the floor. Without a word, she turned and returned moments later with the dustpan and broom. But instead of sweeping, she knelt and reached for the larger pieces with her bare hands, and a sharp edge bit into her palm. God damn it! She got up from her position, running towards the bathroom sink, leaving a trail of blood behind her. Blood had also dripped onto the Duluth bag on her way out. The blood soaked into the cloth, then vanished without a trace, as though pulled away by an invisible, supernatural force that was inside. Once again she returned, but now with a bandage around her right hand, and she swept up the remaining glass. A small shard skidded across the floor, landing near a collection of old photographs, magnified on an image of a boat. Blood and wine pooled across the picture, exposing the truth of what had occurred and what had long been buried in silence.
Chapter 3. Lost but Found.
It was now 1938, 64 years earlier. Joni and Gloria were 21, and it was 6 months before their trip. With no luck finding work on a steamer or any other method of transportation, the girls decided to buy a car and drive to their destination. They both had been planning to take a trip that summer. They planned to drive from Los Angeles to Mexico, then head north through Canada. On the return trip, they'd pass through the Ozarks before continuing to Alaska. Over the past few months, they've been gathering camping gear and pamphlets, stealing canned goods from the cupboards, all to save money while away. To them, they felt they were set. Now, with the purchase of a vehicle, safety was a concern. The scent of motor oil and rust filled Uncle Eddie's garage. The man himself, a burly figure in his 50s, lay half-buried under an ancient, beat-up car. His coveralls bore the stains of years of hard work, never having seen soap or water. Joni and Gloria stood nearby, watching with concern as Uncle Eddie grunted, sliding out from beneath the car, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. "I wish you girls had checked with me before buying this piece of junk. The engine mounts are completely rusted out." "It was only $50, Gloria protested. Uncle Eddie shook his head, chuckling grimly. "I can see why. It's not even worth that." As if to prove his point, a loud crash echoed through the garage. The engine dropped straight out of the car, landing with a sickening thud on the floor. Uncle Eddie stared at it, then made the sign of the cross. "Mother Mary and Joseph, that was close. You ladies won't be taking this car across the country. You're going to have to come up with another way to travel." A day before departure, a murder of crows descended upon the towering oak outside Joni's home. The tree darkened with their numbers, their caws a relentless chorus. One crow, larger than the rest, took flight, its black feathers bearing an eerie white marking across its chest, resembling a clergy collar as it soared toward Joni's open bedroom window. Inside, Joni hummed to herself as she packed her suitcase. Music played from her record player, muffling the sounds outside. Beside her on the bed lay a half-eaten cookie. The crow landed on the windowsill, stepping inside. Its sharp caw pierced the air, making Joni jump. She turned to see it pacing, its beady black eyes fixated on her. "Hey, you! That's the third time this week?" The crow squawked again. Joni followed its gaze to the cookie. "You hungry?" Cautiously, she broke off a piece and held it out. That evening, dinner was a tense affair. Joni's mother sat stiffly, her silverware clattering onto the plate with a scoff as she watched her father, bound to a wheelchair and showing signs of dementia, try to eat his food. Her father was embracing the silence after a long day at work. "I wish you girls weren't going by boat," she said sharply. "What happens if it sinks?" Joni's father almost choked on his food. "Honey, the ship isn't going to sink." Nobody thought the Titanic would sink either, and look what happened. It hit an iceberg, and everyone froze to death. Joni rolled her eyes as she pushed the food around on her plate. "We bought a lemon of a car, and Gloria's Uncle Eddie nearly got crushed fixing it. We didn't have a lot of options." Her mother remained unconvinced. "The weirdest thing happened today. A crow flew right into my window, and I hand-fed it." Joni tried to change the subject. "It could have had rabies," her mother shot back. Her father snickered. "I think our daughter is smarter than that." "This is the same daughter who decided to jump out of a plane for fun." Joanne rolled her eyes at the comment. Joni's father wiped his face before he tried to change the topic. You did have 2 baby crows you took care of when you were little. Do you remember that? One had that marking on its breast. It made it look like it was a priest. Joni's father remembered. Didn't one die? Joni's grandfather spoke as he shoveled food into his mouth. Joni's mother lowered her glass from her lips. Dad? Joni's grandfather replied while eating his food. What? It did, didn't it? Joni gave him a look. Your dog ate it, Grandpa. Grandpa signaled as he ate. He now remembered. Where is that damn mutt anyway? I haven't seen him all day. He looked around. Dad, she died over 40 years ago, Joni's mother replied. Goddamn dementia, he stated while putting more food in his mouth. Dad, please, that word, Joni's mother said in disgust. It's said that crows can remember facial features and communicate to others if someone is good or bad. Some cultures believe they provide guidance and protection during challenging times, guided by unseen forces. Joni tried to continue on the subject so she didn't have to hear from her mother about the trip. Evil priests turn into crows. Nuns turn into magpies. Means bad things to come. Her grandfather blurted out. Joni's mother paled. See? Too many bad signs. The table erupted into laughter. That's been your answer for everything, Mom, Joni said. No, it has certainly not. She gave a stern look. You just said the boat was going to sink. Joni looked to her father, laughing. Her father chuckled. I'm with our daughter on this one. Her grandfather pointed a wrinkled finger at Joni's mother, his voice booming. Go to the crows, woman! Joni's father patted his shoulder. Dad, it's not nice to tell your daughter to go to hell. Sorry, honey, the old man muttered, before turning back to his meal. The phone rang, and Joni excused herself, knowing it was likely Gloria. As she left the room, her grandfather called out, Tell old man Humphreys I will come clean up OJ's shit after I eat. He mumbled to himself. The stupidity of animals wandering miles just to relieve themselves when they have all this space right here. He continued to eat the food on his plate. The parents look with concern at Grandpa, as his illness has been getting worse. 1 week later, the bus terminal buzzed with activity as Joni and Gloria prepared to depart. Their families gathered around, exchanging tearful goodbyes as the driver loaded their bags. Joni's mother clung to her. You're not my little girl anymore. Her father smiled. You'll always be my little girl. Mom, I'm only gone for the summer. Geez. Joni grunted as she tried to pry herself away from her mother's grip. The bus driver gave the final call. The girls boarded, their excitement bubbling over. This is going to be so much fun, Joni whispered, as they moved toward the back. Gloria grinned. I know. I didn't think we were ever going to make it. As the bus rumbled away, neither of them noticed the crow with the clergy collar perched atop the terminal sign, watching them disappear into the horizon. Joni leaned back in her seat, gazing out the window as the bus rumbled down the road. It seems like a lifetime ago that we bought that crappy car, she mused. Gloria laughed, shaking her head. Remember when the engine almost fell on Uncle Eddie's head? Joni chuckled. Oh my God, that was scary and funny after the fact. I still can't believe we tried to find jobs on a steamer boat. Their laughter filled the space between them until a voice interrupted. An African-American woman, seated nearby, leaned slightly toward them. Excuse me, girls. Is this your first time traveling by bus? Gloria nodded. Yes, ma'am. The woman offered a knowing look. Just so you're aware, typically your kind sit closer to the front. We black folks are usually kept in the back. Joni straightened in her seat. We don't think like that, ma'am. We are all equal and share this world. That includes this bus. A warm smile came across the woman's face. Those are very kind words. I wish everybody were like that. We usually have to play musical chairs when others get on. They seem to think they're entitled to any seat they want. She finished with an awkward laugh. Joni frowned. I hope a day comes when someone refuses to move from their seat. The woman nodded. We all do, dear. We all do. You enjoy your trip now, And you girls be safe." The woman smiled before she turned back around. The cab rolled to a stop at the Mexican shipping port. Joni and Gloria stepped out, waiting as the driver unloaded their bags. Nearby, a group of men caught their attention. It was Richard, Jerry, Alex, and Rose. Alex was a clean-cut Canadian soldier. He stood beside Rose, his sweet and pretty but heavier-set girlfriend with long hair. The men pointed in their direction, and the girls immediately turned away, snickering. What the girls didn't know was that they had dropped their tickets, and Richard had watched it happen. With all the noise, the girls couldn't hear them shouting, and then they got lost in the crowd before the girls were found again. "Are they still looking at us?" Gloria whispered. Joni risked a glance over her shoulder. "Two of them are coming this way." The girls grabbed their bags, giggling like schoolgirls, and hurried away. Richard and Jerry, now seeing the girls and how attractive they were, would be able to get to know them if they kept the tickets. So Richard put them in his back pocket and told Jerry he would dispose of them later. The dock bustled with activity as Joni and Gloria searched for their ship. A crow flitted from mast to mast, its dark feathers standing out against the sky. Strangely, it's the one that had the distinctive clergy collar marking around its neck. It was as if it was keeping a watchful eye. "Do you have the tickets?" Joni asked. Gloria stopped abruptly, her face paling. Frantically, she dug through her bag. "Oh no, Joni, I can't find them." A voice rang out over the port. "Second, last call to board." Panic set in. Joni rushed to the shipmate who was checking the tickets. "Can you hold the ship? We've misplaced our tickets." The shipmate barely glanced up from his clipboard and shook his head. "You have 10 minutes. After that, you're out of luck. We have a schedule to keep." Joni's stomach sank. "What are we supposed to do then?" "Not my problem," he said curtly. "No tickets, no boarding. We aren't taking any stowaways." Passengers pressed forward, and he waved them past, dismissing her plea. The ship's horn bellowed as it drifted away, leaving Joni and Gloria stranded. Their suitcases lay open, clothes spilled onto the wooden planks of the dock. Gloria groaned. "What are we going to do now, Joni?" Joni sighed. "I guess we'll have to stay in a hotel until the ship comes back. Hopefully we can find our tickets, or we'll have to buy new ones." Gloria frowned. "This is going to make a big dent in our budget." Behind them, Richard and Jerry approached. "Are you guys okay?" Richard asked. Joni nodded. "Yeah, we just misplaced our tickets." Richard exchanged a knowing glance with Jerry, a small smirk playing on their lips. Joni tapped her fingers against her arm. "Did we leave them in the cab?" Gloria, momentarily distracted by Jerry's presence, barely heard her. I don't know." "Where are you girls headed?" Richard asked. "Vancouver, Canada." Joni, still in a frantic state, looked around. "Well, it's your lucky day," Richard said, opening his arms in a welcoming manner. Gloria scoffed. "It's been a very unlucky day." Richard chuckled. "We're actually on our way back home to Canada." Gloria perked up. "Do you guys have a boat?" "We sort of work on one. I can get you a cabin, but there's a catch," Richard replied. Gloria crossed her arms. "There's always a catch. We aren't sleeping with you guys for a ride. We're not cheap women." Richard raised his hands. "That's not it. Unfortunately, you'll have to stay in cabin 49. We can just call our parents and make an excuse for why we were late calling. We can say there was a problem with the boat." Gloria found an excuse to be around Jerry. Joni hesitated. "How do you plan on getting us on the ship?" "The captain's my dad, and I'm the first mate." He winked. Gloria eyed him suspiciously. "So, what's wrong with cabin 49? Richard hesitated. "It's small." And at the same time, Jerry blurted, "It's haunted." "We'll take it." Joni decided. Gloria looked at Joni, who looked a little concerned about the haunted room part. Gloria looked to Joni, and Joni replied, "What? It's a free ride, haunted or not?" Richard bent down to help gather their spilled clothes. As he did, he picked up a bra, his face instantly flushing. "I'm so sorry." Still holding the undergarment as he froze, Gloria snatched it from his hand. "We got this, thanks." She blushed. He cleared his throat. I'm Richard, and this is Jerry. Our friends Alex and Rose are over there somewhere. Joni and Gloria introduced themselves, and as they exchanged pleasantries, Jerry suddenly tensed. He nudged Richard, nodding toward the ship. 4 Native American men stood on the promenade deck, staring at them. Charles stood beside Robin, a heavy-set man with long hair, along with 2 others. "Richard, you see that?" Jerry murmured. Joni lifted her camera and snapped a quick picture of the men. Richard sighed. "Just ignore them." Alex and Rose had joined them by then. Richard gestured toward Alex. "Our friend here just finished his training as a soldier. He's heading back home to Ontario." From the ship, Charles shouted something before he and his companions walked away, laughing. Richard turned back to the girls. "Don't worry, you won't see those guys. They have to stay on a specific part of the ship." Later, as they walked the deck, Joni spotted a life preserver with Vancouver emblazoned across it. She picked it up, grinning. "Gloria, get a picture of me." She handed Gloria her camera, raised the object, and, with a playful smirk, she flipped her off just as the shutter clicked. "Let's show you around, and then we will get you to your room." Noticing a deckhand, Richard asked him to bring the girls' luggage to the room. The man looked surprised. "What's wrong?" Richard asked the deckhand. "You said cabin 49, sir," he replied. "That's correct." Richard gave the man a short but firm response. Gloria looked at Joni, once again with a concerning look. The man cleared his throat. "I will get right on it, sir." The man grabbed the bags and left the group. Gloria leaned in, whispering, "Why did you say we would stay in a haunted room? I'm not staying in any haunted room." Joni, equally hushed, replied, "They're just trying to scare us. And where else are we going to stay?" Richard approached with a friendly smile. "Do you ladies want a tour?" "That would be great," Gloria said, casting a smile toward Jerry. Joni agreed with Gloria's reply.
Chapter 4, Cabin 49.
The ocean liner loomed large against the horizon. Its sheer size was an impressive sight. The sun glinted off its polished exterior as waves lapped against its hull. On the sun deck, the group marveled at the spacious area dotted with chairs. Passengers lounged in the sunlight, enjoying the open breeze. Joni and Gloria felt like royalty as they got a private tour of the ship. Unfortunately, Jerry was asked to work and wasn't able to continue the tour. "The sun deck is the perfect place to relax," Richard explained. "Fresh air, open views, ideal for taking in the ocean." Richard acted as a tour guide or a salesman, trying to be elaborate and funny. He led them down to the promenade deck, a charming walking area with protective coverings and an unbroken view of the sea. "This is the promenade deck," he continued. "Great for a stroll. During docking, lower-class passengers are allowed up here, but once we're on the open sea, they must remain on their level. The ship is divided by class, which is why you saw those natives up here earlier. What's the problem with you guys anyway?" Joni's curiosity hadn't left her since she first saw them in Mexico. "Joni!" Gloria smacked her in the arm, embarrassed over the question. "It's okay. There are tensions right now between the natives and the whites over territory and human rights, and they don't take too kindly to the sight of soldiers fondly." Richard finished as he opened the door. He didn't really seem to be concerned about the situation. Inside the ship, the grandeur of the dining saloon stunned them. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above tables set with fine china and silverware. A large bar gleamed at the back of the space. "This is the dining saloon, reserved for first-class passengers. Here, they indulge in luxurious meals with exquisite service," Richard said with a touch of pride. Gloria raised an eyebrow. "What does that make us, since we're in cabin 49? Richard grinned. "First class, of course. That cabin was once a captain's quarters." "Is he the ghost that haunts it?" Gloria was serious with the question, and Joni chuckled and shook her head. "I'm serious," Gloria replied. Richard laughed. "It's a joke we play on the new guys who come to work on the boat. It's initiation. We like to scare the life out of them before they even get settled in." They aren't told it's a prank until another newbie arrives. He gave a quick shrug. It's just tradition, and I'm used to doing it with the new guys. I thought it would be funny to continue the haze with you girls. Gloria didn't think his explanation was real. He was hiding something. Even though the crew played elaborate jokes on the new sailors, something was unsettling about the room. Old tales claimed that parts of the boat had been salvaged from a wreck once owned by Father McNaught, better known as the Evil Priest. Legend said he murdered his congregation, cast their bodies overboard, and then took his own life. Cabin 49 was whispered to have been his. Most dismissed it as nothing more than sailor talk, like the myth of Fiddler's Green. No one truly knew. They were only stories, but Richard wasn't about to tell them what he knew. He then led them into the smoking room, which was a richly furnished space filled with dark wood paneling, leather armchairs, and the heavy scent of cigars. A few men sat in quiet conversation, swirling brandy in their glasses. Joni coughed. Sure does stink. They moved on, entering the lounge and reading room, where plush furniture and the soft sound of a piano created an atmosphere of refined comfort. The walls from ceiling to floor were covered in bookshelves. This is where you'll find books, comfortable seating, and sometimes live music, Richard explained. A great place to unwind. They passed through the grand ballroom, where a lively dance lesson was in progress. Music filled the air, and elegantly dressed passengers moved gracefully across the floor. Evening dances and social events are a highlight here, Richard remarked. The ballroom is the heart of the ship's nightlife. Joni chuckled. You should have been a tour guide. Richard smirked. Funny enough, I used to be, but I was finally promoted by my dad. I enjoy doing this occasionally. He then smiled at Joni. They continued through the ship, peeking into the first-class cabins. They were spacious suites with fine wood paneling, plush furniture, and private baths. These cabins are the epitome of luxury, Richard stated, gesturing to the elegant rooms. Gloria sighed. Too bad we couldn't get one of these. Instead, we have the haunted room. Joni playfully pinched her arm. Ouch! Gloria blurted before smacking Joni back. Richard's expression turned apologetic. If something opens up, I'll move you ladies. For now, you're still treated as first-class passengers. He smiled. The tour continued through the second and third-class areas. The second-class dining room was more communal, but still comfortable. The third-class cabins were small and basic, with shared bathrooms in the hallways. Laughter echoed through the third-class common space, where passengers drank, smoked, gambled, and lost themselves in music and dance. This is where the real fun happens, Richard admitted. Come nightfall, this place turns into the best party on the ship. Thought you said the grand ballroom was the place to be? Joni asked. If you're 60 and a bore, he said, and the trio started laughing. They reached the recreational deck, where passengers played shuffleboard and various games at scattered tables. This deck is for leisure and friendly competition, Richard said. Third-class passengers aren't allowed here. Second class can come at specific times. As they descended to the lower levels, the atmosphere changed. The kitchen bustled with chefs preparing meals, while the laundry area hummed with activity. In the engine room, the deep hum of machinery vibrated through the metal walls. Jerry, working among the engineers, smiled and waved to Gloria. I'll catch up with you guys when I'm off. He yelled to the group over the machinery, but it was obvious he was specifically speaking to Gloria. Richard gestured around. This might not be glamorous, but it keeps the ship running. Down below is the cargo area, but I doubt you want to see that. The safe master takes his job very seriously. The group made their way back up the narrow passage and finally reached cabin 49, halting just outside the door. An awkward silence settled over them. I feel like I should tip you, Joni mentioned. Richard grinned and tapped his cheek. A kiss will do. Joni rolled her eyes. That wasn't very gentlemanly. Never hurts to try, he replied with a wink. Richard handed Joni a key as Gloria snapped a picture of the door sign. Joni raised an eyebrow. Why a picture? For evidence in case it's haunted, Gloria said with a smirk. Joni shook her head, and Richard chuckled. "I have some things to take care of. Go enjoy the view, and we'll come get you here when the dining hall opens at 5. Joni unlocked the door. They said their goodbyes, and they stepped inside. The room was cramped, barely fitting the metal bunk beds with chipped frames and thin blankets. A small, crooked mirror hung above an old, dented chest. A tiny window looked out onto the deck, and there was a shared bathroom down the hall. Joni let out a short laugh. Richard wasn't joking about the size. "Where's the bathroom?" "I think I saw it in the hallway." Gloria then hesitated. "Do you really think it's haunted?" Joni rolled her eyes. "Let's get out of this shoebox and meet some more boys," Joni suggested. "What about Richard?" "He's nice, but not my type. I see you've got a thing for Jerry." She gave her a playful nudge. Gloria blushed. "I think he's handsome. I'd like to see more of him." Joni grinned. "You cheap woman, you!" Gloria playfully slapped her arm. "I definitely am not!" Their laughter echoed through the small room as they gathered their things and stepped out. The days on the ship passed in a blur of laughter and camaraderie. Each evening, they sat at a large round table in the dining hall, clinking glasses as they shared stories and jokes. One night, Richard had told one so funny that Jerry spit out his water, prompting Gloria to dab at his shirt with a napkin, shaking her head fondly. In the golden light of dusk, they would all gather on the recreational deck for a friendly game of shuffleboard. Alex impressed everyone with his perfect shots, earning cheers, while Rose was opposite. She furrowed her brow in concentration, tongue poking out slightly as she took her turn, her puck always stopping just short, which caused a round of chuckles and encouragement. Joni went last, but her puck consistently veered far off to the side. Instead of getting frustrated, she just laughed with the others. Meanwhile, Jerry and Gloria stood watching the sunset, uninterested in the game, but perfectly content in each other's company. One time, as night fell, the group found themselves in the ship's lounge, seated around a small table, engaged in a game of cards. Gloria played her hand with a triumphant grin, while the others groaned in defeat, tossing their cards onto the table. Richard feigned outrage, but Gloria merely nudged him playfully, enjoying her victory. That next morning, they all stood on the sun deck, leaning against the railing as the ocean stretched endlessly before them. The setting sun bathed them in a warm glow, and Joni closed her eyes, inhaling the salty air with a peaceful expression. A distant pod of orcas surfaced in the water, prompting excited pointing from Alex and Rose. Joni and Gloria watched in awe as they both quickly snapped a picture to capture the moment. Later that night, the group lounged once more, sipping drinks and exchanging stories. Jerry, ever the entertainer, broke into a silly dance move, sending the group into fits of laughter. Joni and Gloria exchanged an amused glance before raising their glasses in a final toast to the evening. Another few days passed. Joni and Gloria strolled down the hallway toward their cabin after dinner. Joni carried a napkin wrapped of cookies. As they walked, 2 young teenagers from the lower decks, dressed in newspaper boy hats and suspenders, lurked from around the corner, watching them. Joni caught a glimpse of movement and turned her head, but the boys quickly disappeared. Reaching their room, Gloria hesitated, glancing once more over her shoulder before stepping inside. "I think we were being followed," she murmured. "Maybe it's those natives?" Gloria looked at Joni, concerned. "They're not allowed up here, remember?" Joni replied, dismissing the thought. "Maybe it's the ghost of Cabin 49. Joni smiled, trying not to break out in laughter. Gloria smirked before playfully swatting the cookies out of Joni's hands. "You didn't!" Joni gasped, eyes wide. "It wasn't me. It was the ghost of Cabin 49, Gloria teased. Joni retaliated by grabbing Gloria's unpacked suitcase and dumping its contents onto the floor. Gloria let out a shocked gasp before doing the same with Joni's belongings. Laughter filled the room as they collapsed onto the bed, only for the mattress to break beneath them. Their laughter doubled as they tried to regain their composure. As the giggles subsided, they noticed something strange. The flooring beneath them had cracked slightly, revealing something hidden beneath the floorboards. Before they could investigate, a sudden crash of breaking glass startled them. A crow's frenzied cawing filled the cabin as it struggled, its head stuck through the shattered window, wings flapping desperately while blood dripped down the wall. From outside, the bird was yanked away, and feathers fluttered in the space before the face of one of the lurking teenagers emerged. "Geez, bees, that crow went smack dab into the winder. You gals want to come to a scoff or what?" he asked in a thick Newfoundlander's accent. Joni frowned. "What's a scoff?" "A party. Do you want to come?" He peered into the room and glanced at the clothes that littered the floor. Gloria crossed her arms. "Not with you guys. How old are you, like 17? 19, Tanks, he replied. Before Joni could reply, another head popped into view. "Come on now, don't be so stogged up. Come along with us." One more head also appeared, their voices overlapping as they tried to persuade the women. One of the boys reached through the open window, trying to unlock it further. Seeing this, Gloria grabbed a suitcase and slammed it against the window, knocking the boy backward. From the hallway, the sound of running footsteps and excited hollers grew louder before a loud crash shook their door. Joni rushed forward, bracing it with her body as the boys tried to push their way inside. The hallway outside echoed with footsteps and hollers before Richard's voice cracked through the tension. "Hey, what the hell do you guys think you're doing? I told you to ask them politely." Joni closed the door while Richard continued to give them shit. "This is why we don't allow you hoodlums up on these decks." "Sorry, Dick. We were just having a bit of fun, you know," one of the teens replied in a nervous tone. "How many times have I told you it's Richard? Now get out of here before I throw you overboard." The sound of footsteps retreated from the door. Moments later, there was a knock, and Joni slowly opened the door. "I'm sorry about that. Are you girls okay?" Richard looked back to see the teens giving him the finger while they continued to mock his name. Joni opened the door. "Yeah, we're fine." He exhaled, cheeks pink with mild embarrassment. "I had to help my dad in the wheelhouse, so I paid one of the deckhands to come ask if you wanted to come to the party." He frowned, half laughing. "Paid that guy so he wouldn't be stupid. Now I'm out a nickel." Joni stepped forward, a smile forming. "We were wondering where you guys were." Before she could say more, Gloria appeared from behind, gently nudging Joni out of the way, like an impatient shadow. "Where's Jerry?" Gloria asked, sharp and direct. Richard rubbed the back of his neck. "He's finishing up in the engine room. He's sorry he couldn't make it either. Anyway, we're headed to a party, and we were." "We would love to," Gloria interrupted, her voice lilting with excitement. "Just give us 20 minutes to get ready."
Chapter 5. An Honest Mistake.
The third-class area was alive with chaos. Lanterns swayed slightly with the ship's motion. Men and women of all ages and backgrounds were packed tight into the room, and nobody seemed to care. The air smelled of sweat, spilled ale, and the faint tang of salt water. Newfoundland folk music roared from the corner, where musicians stomped and fiddled with unbridled glee. People danced on tables, boots scuffing the wood in rhythm, arms flailing like sails in a storm. Off to the side, Charles stood alongside Robin, who hung on to Charles's every word like it carried sacred weight, accompanied by the other two Native American men. They nursed drinks and cast glances at the dancing crowd. Charles's eyes fixed, unmoving on Joni. Joni leaned close to Richard, raising her voice over the din. "Canadians are crazy!" Richard turned, cupping a hand to his ear. "Pardon? I can't hear you." Laughing, she shouted again. "I said Canadians are crazy!" Still lost in the noise, he leaned in closer. "Do you want to go somewhere quieter?" "Yeah, let's go." Joni reached for Gloria, who was mid-spin with an older Newfoundlander who was trying to teach her the footwork. Gloria reluctantly pulled away from the dance, grabbing Jerry's hand as she did. The four of them slipped through the crowd and out into the hall. Behind them, Charles watched, his eyes tracking their every move until they disappeared. The cold, salt air wrapped around them like silk. The moonlight shimmered across the waves, stretching to the horizon in ghostly silver. The hum of distant music dulled behind steel walls. Joni leaned against the railing, her gaze fixed out to sea. The moon so beautiful over the water, not like back home. She stared out at the horizon, unaware that Richard had quietly tossed her lost tickets into the ocean. Gloria and Jerry stood a few feet away, their fingers slowly twining together without words. "I wish I hadn't done that to your cookies earlier," Gloria said, which in return made the girls snicker. "You girls hungry? You should have said something. Come on, follow me." He led them to the kitchen and pushed the door open. The galley was quiet. Metal glinted from stoves and ovens as they crept through. Richard motioned for silence, then spotted a stack of biscuits on the counter, golden, thick, and steaming fresh from the oven. With a mischievous grin, he crept forward and snatched 4. A voice exploded from out of sight. "What the hell are you doing, Richard?" bellowed the cook as he emerged. "You know you can't have guests in this area." "Run!" Richard shouted. Laughter exploded from the group as they bolted, dodging pots and pans as the girls' shoes clapped against the tile. The cook shouted after them as they burst through a door and down a cold iron stairwell into darkness. "Slow down! Someone's going to get hurt," he said as the door slammed shut. The bottom cargo bay groaned around them. Metal crates lined the walls, stacked into narrow alleys. A massive net hung mid-air, cradling boxes like trapped prey. A heavy safe stood silent and unmoving beside a scratched coffin, half hidden beneath canvas. Their laughter echoed until they spotted movement. Rats, black and swift, scurried past them. Joni yelped, then laughed again, breathless. They slumped onto a few nearby crates, unaware that they were sitting on a coffin as Richard handed out the biscuits. "We really shouldn't be down here," Jerry whispered. The moment shifted, and the shadows clung tighter. From somewhere deeper in the bay, voices echoed indistinctly, approaching. The footsteps continued. Then, Charles and his group appeared, lighting a cigarette with a Zippo he spoke through the flame. "Look what we have here," he said. "A couple Yankee women with a couple Canadian men." Robin grinned. "If you had babies, they'd be Can-Americans." The other 2 natives laughed. Charles took a drag, then narrowed his eyes. "What the hell? That's my grandfather's coffin you're sitting on." Everyone froze. Joni paled. "Oh my gosh, we're so sorry. We didn't realize." She jumped up from her position. Charles flicked his cigarette to the floor, the ember landing near Joni's foot. Richard stood quickly, stepping between them. "Look, man, it's dark. We didn't know." Charles moved closer, their faces just inches apart. Before things could escalate, a voice rang out behind them. "You're not supposed to be down here," hollered the safe master, a man in his 60s with a limp and a clipboard tucked under his arm. The tension broke, and Charles backed off, but not before sneering. "We'll see you again." He turned and walked away. Their footsteps faded into the shadows. Joni and the others stepped inside cabin 49, their breath hitching as another crow had found the window. This one had the noticeable clergy collar on its breast as it flapped its wings wildly, trapped within the space. The room was still in disarray from earlier, the mess exacerbated by the bird's frantic struggle. They scrambled to guide it out, but the crow took flight and darted toward the window and vanished into the night. "Did the crow do all this?" Jerry asked, glancing at the chaos. The girls giggled. "No, we were just fooling around earlier, and it kind of got carried away," Joni admitted. "I'd say," Richard muttered. "The floorboard," Gloria said. "What about it?" Richard asked. The girls exchanged glances before they dragged the bed. The men joined in to help. "If something's broken, I can get someone here to fix it," Richard offered. Joni shook her head. "There's something under the wood. We saw it, but then a crow flew into the window, and those kids came." She reached down, her fingers slipped between the cracks, and she pulled. As she freed it, her fingers brushed against something hard. It was a book wrapped in cloth. Joni unwrapped the cloth bundle, revealing a weathered, leather-bound book. The words, "The Son of Nobody," were etched into the cover. Beneath them, another inscription. Knowledge lands beyond the lands. Below it, a small symbol, the spiral of a snail, signifying immortality. A photograph slipped free, fluttering to the floor. Richard picked it up, frowning at the portrait with the words, "The Evil Priest," written on it. The man wore spectacles, though one eye was now blind, a scar running the length of his face. His remaining eye burned with an unsettling intensity. Around his neck hung an elaborate Celtic cross. Faint, inked words also scrawled across the bottom of the image, appearing almost like blood. "Go to the crows." Joni found this phrase odd. She had heard it before. "The rumors are true," Richard breathed. "I'll be damned." "What rumors?" Joni became intrigued. "I thought you said you just played tricks on the new sailors." "I didn't want to frighten you. You seemed worried about the room, and at first, I thought the stories were just rumors. But now that we found this, it proves they were true. People said this ship was built from the wreckage of, or perhaps even is, the vessel once owned by a Celtic priest named Father McNaught. After leaving the church, he founded a cult called the Other Realms of Our Existence. He declared himself the son of nobody, though outside his congregation he became known as the Evil Priest. Gloria's voice trembled as she asked, "So, the room is actually haunted?"
Chapter 6. The Son of Nobody.
The priest was exiled by the church in 1890. Rumors claimed he dealt in dark magic, evidenced by the spiral mark burned on his wrist. It was a symbol of broken doctrine, hidden truth, and eternal life. His discovery of a forbidden realm solidified his occult transgression, leading to his banishment and rebirth as the son of nobody. There are things that walk with the living, not ghosts, not gods, just those who never truly left. He's not the first to cross. He might just be the first to come back with proof, Richard stated, as he told the others what he knew about the evil priest. He walked the high moors and seashores of Ireland, a belief much greater than God himself or nature. What lies beyond it, he spoke of mirrors beneath the sea, of lands that echoed our own like breath fogging a window pane. He added some ominous words to make the story sound more like a ghost story than the priest's history. On the ship's deck, the congregation gathered. The sky was dark above the water. No bells, no stained glass. Only salt, wind, and the whisper of waves as they stand on the vessel's deck. Father McNaught raised a hand, weathered and strong. The spiral symbol burned on his wrist was barely visible beneath his robe's cuff.
"We are not lost,"
he stated. His voice was low, patient, and unnervingly calm.
"We are unfinished on this earth."
Around him stood the faithful, each bearing the spiral scar on their wrist, etched by ritual, sealed by oath. They formed a quiet ring, their robes heavy with salt and smoke. Brother Callum stood tall among them, broad and weathered. Beside him, Sister Eloise held her posture with quiet grace, her copper braid coiled down her back, her gaze steady and unreadable. The Mass was not like anything seen before. Where others offered bread, Father McNaught gave ash cakes, charred and blackened to symbolize burned time. The wine had long since been replaced by salt water, drawn from a cove only he knew. At the ritual's end, each member took a turn with the basin, a carved stone bowl filled with brine and swirling petals of dried heather. They held their heads beneath the surface, not for baptism, but for rehearsal of what would come.
"Should you reveal the realms you drown tonight, you will wake on the right shore."
He took his knife, running it down his eye. He didn't scream or flinch. He showed strength as the blood began to spill on his face.
"This is the sacrifice I give to the realm, one eye for what I've seen."
Sister Eloise hands him a cloth to wipe the blood from his face. His followers claimed he showed them other worlds, but soon after, they began to go insane. Some took their own lives. Others drowned themselves in the bowls after speaking of the forbidden truths. Then, one day, his boat was found, but the priest and his 200 followers had vanished. He preached of a second world, not heaven, not hell, but something deeper. A place where time loops, where drowned souls don't rise, but drift sideways. Where doors open, but you don't choose which version you walk through. Where your deepest thoughts and imagination can conjure otherworldly creatures. Even now, sailors whisper of sightings of his congregation adrift on moonless tides. Cloaked in charred vestments, their hollow sockets stare into nothing, hands forever clasped in prayer, as if beseeching salvation that never came. They say the ship moves without wind, its timbers groaning like a choir of the damned, and those who glimpse it are marked by dreams of burning and hymns sung in reverse. In 1910, Father McNaught stood at the bow of his small boat, lantern in hand. His most loyal followers paddled. A silent procession of boats trailed behind them. Their lanterns flickered against the black water. His ship vanishes in the distance, leaving it behind for good.
Should you drown tonight, you will wake on the right shore.
His words were never meant for mortal ears. They held secrets of what may come, warnings carved in salt and shadow. But the congregation was suspected of speaking of the forbidden place, defying his command. Now the realm demands penance. Its creatures stir, leviathans from the deep, winged horrors from the clouds, and beasts that walk the drowned shores. If the realm does not call them forth, then he must execute the purge. Ahead, a shimmering curtain of light hovered over the water. The priest's boat passed through and disappeared. The others followed, swallowed by the unknown. On shore, they gather. The flames from the oil lanterns cast long shadows across the space as they flicker. The congregation, their faces hidden in the half-light, sat in tense silence. In the center stood the evil priest, his face concealed by the deep hood of his cloak. His voice, when it came, was like a distant thunderstorm, rumbling and full of ominous authority.
The veil thins, my children. The realms bleed into each other, spilling truths upon this fragile world. Truths too potent for the unworthy to comprehend.
He intoned, his voice carrying an unnatural resonance that made the air crackle with tension. He paused, as though sensing something. Then he noticed a figure in the distance. The figure's presence shifted the air, and the priest faltered for a moment. Then, with a forceful motion, he raised his arms, his voice growing louder.
Some of you have faltered. Some of you have dared to whisper to outsiders. You think they will understand? And for those who have fled, those who defy us, they will be found. No one escapes the eye of the realm.
His voice lowered, becoming chilling.
And when they are dragged back, they will kneel before the great threshold and beg for forgiveness. But none will be given.
The congregation bowed their heads, trembling, as the weight of his words sank deep into their hearts, knowing the consequences of what happens if they exposed their secret. After countless journeys to the realm, its visitors had transformed a barn into a makeshift church. The worn beams of the structure exuded an eerie aura, absorbing the unearthly essence of the realm. Unbeknownst to the congregation, their comings and goings had awakened life forms long dormant in the realm's shadows, creatures unseen and beyond imagination. As they left the sermon and reached the shore, they found their boats splintered and scattered like discarded toys. The jagged remnants bobbed forlornly in the water. The group descended into chaos. Paranoia twisted their thoughts, fracturing unity into frayed edges. A thunderous splash broke the fragile silence, rhythmic and unrelenting. The sound clawed at their resolve, spiraling the group into unchecked terror. Father Callum and Sister Eloise, who now had also sacrificed an eye, stood beside him as he lingered at the shore, his gaze fixed on the shattered boats, as he told himself his followers had become weak. A splash echoed again, a sinister repetition. The water, blackened and restless, seemed to whisper secrets he dared not hear. A distant guttural scream echoed over the water. Father McNaught smiled, the cruel twist of his lips.
The realm is calling. It needs me to carry out the command.
Sister Eloise yelled through the din of panic. "Return to the barn!" she ordered, her urgency a lifeline amidst the frenzy. The congregation fled. Their footsteps vanished into the shadows of the forest. The priest stayed behind, and then he blinked. He now stood motionless outside the barn, watching as an inferno devoured everything in its path. Screams, muffled by the thick smoke, echoed from within. The sky above began to darken, and rain began to fall, but the rain wasn't water. It was blood. It splattered across his face, marking him with its crimson stains. He tilted his head back, allowing the blood-like rain to wash over him, as the world around him burned. The forest stretched out before him, ancient trees standing twisted and dead, and their branches reaching like desperate hands toward the sky. Father McNaught stood at the edge of a clearing, his mind numb and his body trembling. It was time. It was time to answer the call. But this time, there was no greater plan. He wrapped a length of rope around the tree as he whispered to the realm, but also to himself.
You asked for their souls, and I gave them to you. Every scream, every tear, every last breath, all in your name. The flesh and bodies burned in eternal damnation. And now, even the stray sheep has returned to your fold. No one remains, no one to resist now.
He stood, arms wide, as if expecting divine acknowledgement.
I have done all that you asked. The boundaries should hold. This cursed realm should cease its bleeding into ours. What more do you want from me? Have I not proven my devotion?
There's silence. Then, from the darkness, the sharp caw from a crow echoed as if it were giving him directions. His expression shifts to realization. He removes the knife from his hip before kneeling on the forest floor. The length of the rope was ready to bind him to the tree.
You shall not kill.
He chuckled malevolently.
And yet here I stand, dripping with the weight of my sins.
He becomes manic, and the crow caws as he laughs.
But who did I kill truly? Was it not my own soul with each board, a flame ignited, with every skin melting from the heat?
He begins to tie the rope around his waist as he quotes the Bible. After the knot's tied, he turns the rope so the knot is out of reach and behind the tree.
Cursed is the man who takes his own life, for his blood shall cry out to the heavens.
He looked down at his trembling hands.
Is this it? Have I not been damned enough for finding this place? Even when I was a priest, did you ever even speak to me? Or was it always just me?
He waits for a sign, but it doesn't come. The crow caws again, louder this time. Father McNaught cuts himself, elbow to wrist. He laughed bitterly as tears streamed down his face.
Then let this be the end. Let this cursed place swallow me whole. If there is justice, then let it find me in the void between the realms.
He then cuts his other wrist before painfully forcing his arms through the rope. He turned his arms so his palms and wounds face up and towards the sky. The crow started cawing excessively before it landed on a branch nearby. And then another came, and then another, before they swarmed the man. They begin to feed on the open wounds, pecking at his flesh, while others pull his veins from his arms. Hundreds of crows are now in the vicinity. One is seen pecking at his face and eye before they all take flight. They fly around the priest in a murmuration-type manner, blackening the sight of the man. The birds wheeled above, a living storm of wings and shrieks, their murmuration swirling just feet away, taunting. Father McNaught lay broken beneath them, barely clinging to breath. His one good eye gone, ripped from its socket. Veins dangled like frayed cords from his forearms, his robes shredded by the frenzy of beaks and claws. Then, silence. The murmuration halted mid-air, as if held by an unseen hand. The crows scattered, vanishing into the dusk like smoke. And in their place, rising from the blood-soaked earth, stood a shadow. It was tall, still, and unmistakably shaped like the priest himself. In a voice that echoed like wind through a crypt, low, disembodied, and ancient, it spoke to him.
I have gathered every fragment of you from the scattered worlds, each broken piece, each forgotten echo. Now we are one, whole, and together we now shall walk the realms, not as shadows, but as something far greater, until the next of kin is chosen.
The girls sat there in awe as Richard finished the story. They didn't know what to say as he stared at them with a serious look on his face. Before they could say anything, Jerry looked up from the book and blurted out laughing. "That's so not true," Richard replied in an offensive tone. "Some of it is. I heard it from a friend who told a friend of mine." The girls rolled their eyes, now unimpressed by the fabricated story. Jerry laughed again. "What part of that is real?" "This boat was built from that vessel clearly," Richard stated as he pointed at the book. Unknowingly, the crow with the clergy collar had been perched outside the window as if it were listening. As the group argued over Richard's ghost story, the crow took flight and perched on the wheelhouse roof. "Wasn't that scary?" Richard asked. "You guys are idiots," Joni replied before drawing her attention to the book.
Chapter 7, Oath of the Crow.
Jerry traced a passage in the book and read it aloud. "By the tides that shift in unseen grace, and by stars where shadows flow, let realms diverge, then worlds embrace. Let gates swing wide to the gloam. Through hidden paths, through secret streams, where time itself has waned, I call the seam of ancient dreams. Through light, through dark, unchained." A sharp gasp left his lips. "Ouch!" He jerked his hand back, a sharp sting blooming on his fingertip. A bead of blood welled, then fell, landing on the page with a soft pat. It soaked in instantly, vanishing before anyone could notice. Then it was noticed that the back of the book was peeling. Beneath the torn layer, some words were seen. Gloria got up from her seat. "Is there a first aid kit anywhere?" Richard took the book from Jerry, while he tried to stop the blood from his wound. "In the hallway, just outside the washroom." He looked. Something was hidden under the page. Richard carefully peeled away the deteriorated paper. It looks like instructions as he continued to remove the backing. Gloria had returned with the first aid kit, and she sat down beside Jerry. "We should do this," Jerry said, excitement creeping into his voice. Joni frowned. "I don't think we should. I don't trust spirit boards. Never mind instructions from a man called the Evil Priest. What if his energy is attached to this? We could be opening Pandora's box. It's just like a parlor game, nothing more. Besides, my story was fake, remember?" Richard dismissed. Gloria grinned. "I'll do it if Joni does." She wanted to impress Jerry so badly. After some convincing, Joni reluctantly agreed. Jerry started singing creepily, and Gloria smacked his arm. Later that night, and under a full moon, the group gathered around a table on the ship's promenade deck. A cluster of candles flickered between them. Richard read from the book. "By the tides that shift in unseen grace, and by stars where shadows flow, let realms diverge, then worlds embrace. Let gates swing wide to the gloam. Through hidden paths, through secret streams, where time itself has waned, I call the seam of ancient dreams, through light, through dark, unchained." He then cut his palm, letting his blood drip into a cup. A crow cawed in the distance as each person read the passage and cut themselves. When the ritual was completed, they placed the cup on the ledge and waited patiently. Moments later, a crow descended, perching on the edge and drinking the offering. Its black feathers framed the distinctive clergy collar pattern. Joni swayed, dizziness washing over her. The world around her swirled, consumed by a hallucination of a murmuration of crows. Hundreds of wings flapped in chaos, swallowing her into darkness. She screamed, and then all the candles blew out. Joni woke on the floor of their cabin, disoriented. "What happened?" she asked. Gloria, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead, replied, "You fainted." A heavy thud from outside jolted them. Heads snapped toward the sound as a fish exploded through the shattered window, thrashing mid-air before smacking the floor with a wet slap. Then another followed, and another. 3 more came, then doubled again, until the room was alive with a grotesque rhythm of writhing bodies. The floorboards slickened, chaos swelling as they stumbled and ducked to avoid the relentless storm of flying fish. They exited the room, and the space fell silent. A dense fog rolled in, thick and consuming, until the boat seemed adrift in nothingness. From within the haze, a shimmering curtain of vibrant colors emerged, as though reality itself had thinned. The offering to the crow had stirred something ancient. A gate revealed itself, glistening ahead of them. The passage had worked. As they crossed through, the boat convulsed. Lights stuttered and flared, shadows clawing across the cabin walls. The compass spun madly, then locked. The radio spat static and died. The engine choked, fell silent for a heartbeat, then roared back with a violent surge. "I think it stopped," Gloria said, but she was too afraid to open the door and look. "What the heck is going on?" Joni said in a worried tone. Richard walked to the doorway, his eyes narrowing. "I'm going to find out." He stepped onto the deck. Hundreds of fish lay across the boards, still flopping. Guests began to gather on the deck from inside to look at the strange sight before them. Gloria turned to Joni, her voice small. "I don't think we were supposed to read that."
Chapter 8. An Archive of Echoes.
Alexis sat on the floor with the pictures placed around her. Unknowingly, she has been creating the same spiral from Father McNaught's book all around her. Grabbing another handful of photos, she began to look through them. She sifted through the collection, her eyes drifting across the images until they came to rest on a particular series. The images showed Joni, Richard, Gloria, and Jerry laughing together, playing games at a bustling fairground. She turned to the next photograph, a decaying Indian outpost, then another, this one capturing a rusting iron bridge. The bridge held her gaze. It was a haunting sight. Twisted metal arches reached skyward, cloaked in a thick, heavy fog that seemed to swallow their remains. Within the shrouded mist, the faint silhouette of a figure lingered, barely perceptible, yet eerily present. Curious, she tilted the photograph, and to her astonishment, the bridge appeared as though it were restored, pristine, gleaming, and whole. Another adjustment to the angle, and it reverted to its ruined state, like a holographic illusion, flickering between 2 realities. Alexis furrowed her brow, finding the anomaly peculiar. However, unwilling to dwell on it too long, and thinking the wine was getting to her, she gently placed the photographs alongside the others. The next photo she looked at was from 25 years earlier. She sat at the chess park with her grandmother. Joni isn't in the picture as she takes it. However, Alexis remembers that time as if it were yesterday. A light breeze carried the scent of autumn leaves. Most of the pieces had been cleared from the board, and Alexis was poised to checkmate her grandmother. Finally, "Grandma, do you think ghosts and monsters are real?" Alexis asked, her fingers hovering over her next move, hesitant not to make a mistake and lose the match. Joni smiled knowingly. "Just as real as you and me. Do you think they live here or come from other dimensions?" She continued to contemplate her move. "I think they come from other worlds. They're energy, just like us. Sometimes they latch onto unknown frequencies, just like objects can become vessels for spirits." Alexis hesitated before asking, "What about people who go missing?" She shifted her piece, her focus slipping, and the move was wrong. Joni's face shadowed. Some slip away into other realms. Witnesses swear they were there, then gone in an instant. No tracks, no trace, only emptiness, as though the world swallowed them whole. For a moment, the words seemed to awaken something long buried in her. With a final decisive move, Joni checkmated Alexis. "That's the game. You're getting better." A tear slipped from Alexis's eye as she surfaced from the memory. Curiosity drew her to the bag. Inside lay 2 rolls of undeveloped film, Javier's knife, a small wooden figurine that seemed to have a striking resemblance to her grandmother, and Father McNaught's book. When she lifted the book, a low energy vibrated through her, alive and unsettling. She placed the items with the growing pile, setting them aside for closer study. That evening, Alexis sat at the dining table with Leland, their plates half finished, and the bottle of wine between them nearly empty. He took a sip from his glass and looked at her. "How's the sorting going?" He looked at her with a smile. "Good. There's a lot to go through." She swirled the wine in her glass before taking another sip, the bandage still on her hand. "Does the pharmacy still develop pictures?" "I found 2 rolls of film in my grandma's bag. I don't even know if they're still any good." Her husband shook his head. "I don't think so. But I believe that nice little Asian couple who owns the store down the street from work still does. It's a dying thing now, with everything being digital. I can take them in for you tomorrow if you'd like. I can save you a trip." She smiled and replied, "I'd appreciate that. I'll stop by the pharmacy and pick up some antibiotic ointment too." Morning blurred into afternoon as Alexis worked in the spare room, absorbed in the rhythm of her project. She didn't notice the front door open or Leland's voice calling her name. "Hey, how's it going?" he said, appearing in the doorway with an envelope of developed photos and a pharmacy bag in hand. His sudden appearance made her jump. "You scared the shit out of me," he chuckled. "I got those pictures developed. How's your hand?" He approached her. "Stop! You're going to mess everything up," she said, making Leland stop in his tracks. "Sorry, just everything's in order." He held the pictures out to her. Alexis sprang up from her seat and took them eagerly. "Thanks." She kissed him before she sat back on the floor. As he left the room, she called to him. "Love you." "Love you too," he called back. Flipping through the photos, Alexis's breath caught. The images were distorted, overdeveloped. A cabin, layered with multiple exposures. There's also that strange shimmer. Then her gaze fixed on a photograph of the instructions that was taken from the book. However, the writing was in Old Gaelic, and she didn't understand it. Driven by curiosity, she searched for its meaning, and after persistent digging, she uncovered the translation. The fractured passage read, "To open the realms of existence, those who hold the book must bleed as the words are spoken, leaving blood for the crows as they pass between realms." When she turned to the book itself, the page was gone. An unseen force seemed to move through her, guiding her fingers as they closed around Javier's knife. She inhaled deeply, emptied her glass of wine, and opened her skin before giving voice to the passage. She winced as the blade pressed back into the wound, blood slipping onto the book. Each drop dissolved on contact, consumed by the realm as if it had been waiting. She then let the blood drip into her glass and placed it on the broken window ledge. Outside, a murder of crows gathered, blackening the tree branches as she read the passage. One crow, marked with a distinctive clergy collar on its breast, flew to the window and began to drink. That night, Alexis's bandaged hand throbbed, keeping her awake. Beside her, her husband snored loudly, which didn't help her insomnia. The shadows in the corners of the room felt oppressive that night, more so than ever before. Was it because she had done the ritual? There, in the very corner of the room, and going unnoticed, a presence lingered. A shadow that seemed to stretch across the walls, dark and foreboding, watching her from a distance. It was the evil priest. The ritual opened the gate.
Chapter 9. The Realm Has Answered.
During the night, the boat had docked. A foul stench of dead fish clung to the morning air as Jerry, Joni, and Gloria waited for Richard's return. They have congregated with the rest of the guests on the deck, looking at the hundreds of fish that have jumped aboard. Most of them have died, but others continue to flop, desperately trying to get to the edge and find water. Dozens of crows seem to be gathering, while others continue to migrate in the area. They fly overhead as others dive down to take advantage of the feeding frenzy, while others perch on the railing and poles waiting for the chance to snag some food. I'm starting to think we did something we weren't supposed to, Joni stated as she plugged her nose and looked at what was displayed in front of her. I feel bad if this was our fault. Poor fish, Gloria chimed in. This phenomenon happens all the time. We always hear stories. Jerry looked at Gloria, trying to be smooth. We had to dock last night. Richard rushed up and interrupted. It was too dangerous with all the fish jumping, and then the fog rolled in, thick as soup. My dad couldn't see anything. He's going to make an announcement soon. The intercom crackled to life, the captain's voice echoing across the ship. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Due to the heavy fog on the water, we will be staying docked for the time being. Safety is our priority, and with visibility at near zero, it would be unwise to continue our journey. We hope the fog will lift by tomorrow morning. In the meantime, while we clean up this fish problem on deck, please feel free to explore the town. There's a fair happening today, which should provide some entertainment. Thank you for your patience and understanding. Since we're stuck here for the day, let's check out that fair, Joni suggested. Gloria brightened. That sounds like fun. Maybe Jerry will win me a prize. She looked at him with a smile. All through the day and into the evening, the fairground glowed with life. The Ferris wheel traced slow circles against the darkening sky, and the carousel whirled, its horses bobbing to the bright music of the organ. Families and wanderers moved through the striped tents, laughter spilling into the night, punctuated by sudden cries of excitement that carried across the fairground lights. Joni walked alongside the others, pulling pieces of cotton candy from her stick. Gloria shared popcorn with Jerry as he held a giant bear he won for her. The thick fog had now begun to creep inland, curling around their feet. If this fog gets as bad as it was on the water, they're going to shut this fair down, Richard murmured. Just off to the side, away from the lively fairground, stood an old wooden outpost. A single stage, 2 posts supporting a slanted roof, and a dilapidated backdrop lined with furs, trinkets, and carved totem poles. Perched atop the outpost, the crow with the clergy collar watched the group as if guarding a secret. The structure itself seemed forgotten, unnoticed by everyone but them. An elderly Native American man sat in a weathered chair, whittling a small figure. Without looking up, he spoke. Every action sends a ripple through the great circle. What you do to the earth, you do to yourself. Remember that your steps awaken stones and stir the air. Each choice is a seed planted in the heart of the universe, and from it, blessings or burdens may grow. Jerry frowned. What's he talking about? Gloria leaned in close to Joni. I think he's referring to last night. Do you think he's some prophet or seer? Joni hesitated. I hope not. Before they could say more, fireworks exploded in the sky, momentarily drawing their and the other guests' attention. When they turned back, the old man and his outpost were gone, replaced only by a rotted structure barely standing. What the? Joni muttered, spotting the wooden figure on the floorboards. She picked it up and slipped it into her bag. Its carved features bore an uncanny resemblance to her, but before she could linger on it, Gloria cut in, breaking her focus. That was a ghost, wasn't it? She stated as she looked around. Before they could dwell on it, movement in the shadows caught their attention. Charles and his group emerged, a bottle of liquor in one hand and a cigarette in the other. Told you we'd meet again. He took a long puff from his cigarette before tossing it to the ground. Without hesitation, Joni and Gloria dropped their snacks and took off running. Richard and Jerry followed. The chase had begun. As the carnival buzzed with chatter and laughter, with the booming display in the sky, Richard, Gloria, Jerry, and Joni darted between vendor tents, the fabric flapping like the wings of startled birds. Their breaths came in quick gasps, hearts pounding as shadows pursued them. The vibrant lights of the fair blurred into streaks as the group vaulted over a small fence, landing awkwardly but not slowing. The forest loomed ahead, its darkness beckoning like an ominous secret. The night embraced them, thick fog curling around their ankles as they stumbled deeper into the trees. Vision was a luxury they didn't have, barely able to keep track of one another. The forest was alive with strange sounds, and tension hung heavy in the air. Richard stopped abruptly in a clearing, leaning on his knees, sweat dripping down his face. I think we lost them. He panted, his words more hopeful than certain. Gloria squinted through the murky air, a sudden unease in her tone. What is that? Her finger trembled as she pointed toward the grotesque silhouette rising from the mist, a twisted iron bridge, crumbling. The fog blanketed its ruins, shrouding details, but not the eerie figure standing at its center. The outline was unmistakable. It was the evil priest watching. Then, without a sound, he vanished. Gloria snapped a picture, her hands trembling. That wasn't the fog playing tricks on me. Someone was there. Jerry glanced at the bridge, his tone shifting to something darker. Maybe it actually is because of what we did. Stop trying to scare us, Gloria retorted, shivering despite her defiance. The group inched closer to the bridge, curiosity battling with unease. Richard broke the tense silence with forced levity. Let's head back. I need a drink after all this. Who cares about a stupid bridge? You scared, Richard? Jerry teased, though his eyes flicked to the bridge uneasily. I've had enough weirdness for one day, and I don't want to be in the middle of a foggy forest if these guys find us. He had a point and began to walk away. Their decision was unanimous, so they turned, leaving the oppressive fog and the unsettling bridge behind to follow Richard. But as Gloria glanced back, she froze. The bridge, which had moments ago seemed alive with sinister energy, now appeared utterly normal and not twisted metal. Yet the sight didn't soothe her, and then a caw from the crow with the clergy collar spooked her, and she turned to catch up with the others. After Gloria left, 4 silhouettes emerged in the mist, crossing the bridge. The faint moonlight revealed familiar shapes. It was Charles and his group. The crow perched silently, watching the men find their way through the fog. Charles looked around. Let's grab a drink. We'll catch them on the boat. The men all agree, and they, too, leave the forest behind. Arriving in a dimly lit beer parlor, alive with conversation and camaraderie, Richard's group mingled uneasily among Alex, Rose, and a crew of Canadian soldiers. The tension was momentarily drowned by conversation and hearty laughter, but the reprieve was short-lived. Charles and his group had entered, their eyes locking onto Richard's crew. Joni nudged Richard, her voice sharp and loud enough to catch Alex and Rose's attention. Geez, look who it is. Richard paled. Jesus, Gloria groaned, her frustration palpable. Oh, great. Alex looked at Richard. He wanted to know more. They've been hassling us for a while now. We accidentally sat on one of their relatives' coffins in the cargo area. Richard explained. They just chased us through the carnival and into a forest, Joni added heatedly. Alex exchanged a glance with 3 of his soldier buddies. Without a word, they approached Charles and his crew. Tension exploded into chaos as insults flew and fists followed. The bar erupted in a brawl, tables overturned, glasses shattered, and shouts filled the air. Richard grabbed Gloria's arm, urgency in his voice. Let's get out of here. They slipped out a side door, the sound of the escalating fight fading into the night behind them. As they exited, the police had arrived to break up the fight. Alex is seen being restrained by an officer. Rose runs to his aid, yelling, but she is quickly cuffed as well. Early that morning, Richard sat quietly with the others against the wooden wall of Cabin 49. His thoughts drifted as soft light filtered through the small window. Joni rested her head on his shoulder, her breathing steady and peaceful in sleep. The fish had been cleaned, though the sharp stench of ammonia still lingered in the room. The bed was tidied, its blankets tucked neatly, a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. On the floor, Jerry and Gloria lay entwined, their faces softened in a rare moment of calm. Richard shifted slightly, careful not to disturb Joni, but his thoughts urged him into action. He gently nudged her awake, whispering so as not to rouse the others. I'm going to see what's going on, he said softly. I'll meet you for breakfast in an hour. Joni blinked sleepily, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Okay, she murmured her reply. Richard turned his attention to Jerry. You coming? I want to check when we'll be underway. Jerry stretched and yawned, shaking his head as he settled back down. I'm staying here. It's my day off. I'll see you at breakfast. The ship lay still, anchored at the dock, but it was impossible to see its bulk through the dense fog that had crept in overnight. The mist clung to the air like a shroud. In the dining hall, Joni, Jerry, and Gloria were already seated, their plates nearly empty, as Richard finally joined them. Jerry leaned back in his chair, looking at Richard expectantly. "So, what's going on?" Before Richard could answer, the scratchy voice of the captain boomed through the ship's intercom. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. As you may have observed, the fog has yet to lift, and visibility remains at 0. In light of these conditions, we shall remain safely docked throughout the day. I must kindly ask that all passengers remain aboard the vessel. Rest assured, the moment conditions permit safe travel, we shall resume our voyage without delay. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation," Jerry said, as he looked around with concern. "I wonder if Alex and Rose are okay," Richard sighed. "I heard they were arrested last night. Hopefully they're released by the time we ship off." "Why were they arrested? They were helping us," Gloria added, frustration evident. "Hopefully those guys who were bothering us were arrested too. They're the ones that should be in jail," Joni added. Richard's eyes lit up with an idea. "Since we have a few hours to spare, I saw on a map that there's an island called the Isle of Montaka not far from here. I say we take a little trip out that way. We can borrow a lifeboat just for a while." Joni hesitated. "We aren't allowed to leave the ship. Nobody will see us," Richard assured her. "And we'll be back before the fog lifts. There and back. I can't stand being on the ship if it isn't moving." Gloria smirked. "I feel rebellious. Her adventurous spirit is taking over." Jerry, however, was less convinced. "I think this is a bad idea. What happens if the ship leaves?" Richard waved off his concern. "We'll be back way before the fog lifts, trust me." Charles and the others stood on the promenade deck, watching as Richard and his group rowed a lifeboat away from the ship. "Let's go," Charles said. "Where are you going?" Robin asked. "To get a lifeboat," Charles answered. "I'm staying here. I'm not missing the boat." One of the men in the group replied, and the other nodded in agreement. Charles turned to Robin. "You wussing out now, too?" Robin cracked a grin. "Let's go get these suckers."
Chapter 10. Javier the Busker.
The further they moved away from the ship, the atmosphere grew darker, and then the boat rocked violently as something struck it. But what it was couldn't be seen because of the fog that blanketed their surroundings. "What was that?" Gloria gasped. "Probably just a fish or a log," Jerry said, peering down at the water to see nothing but mist. "Can't see squat out here." A loud splash echoed again, but this time it was followed by an eerie whooshing sound that came from above. "Did you guys hear that?" Joni asked. "Lots of birds out here," Richard reasoned. "They're probably flying low because of the fog." "Stop and listen," Joni insisted. "That sounded big." Richard stops rowing, listening to the nothingness that surrounded them. Meanwhile, in Charles's lifeboat, Robin pointed ahead. "I can see them." The faint beam of a flashlight was seen up ahead. They began to row faster, but just as they gained some speed, something massive splashed beside them, rocking their vessel. "What was that?" Robin asked, gripping the sides. "Probably just a whale," Charles dismissed. Robin shuddered. "Better not be an octopus or giant squid. Those things scare me." "Remember the story we used to be told when we were kids?" Charles rolled his eyes. "There's none of those out here, and it was a story just to scare us, just like the rest of them. Now row faster. We can catch them by the time they reach shore." Gloria clutched her oar, becoming scared of the mysterious noises that surrounded them. "I want to go back." Richard, however, was determined. "I can see the shore. We're almost there." As they rowed forward, the fog suddenly parted, revealing the shore. The sky was locked in perpetual twilight, the air deathly still. Behind them, the fog remained dense, swallowing the water in its gray embrace. Everything was deathly silent. No sound of waves, no wind, just an oppressive, unnatural stillness. Joni's breath hitched as she spotted a shadow moving on land. "There's someone right there," She pointed, and the others looked but saw nothing. "We're hitting shallow waters," Richard said, jumping out to pull the boat ashore. Shattered remnants of boats lay strewn across the shoreline, their splintered hulls and tangled rigging half buried in sand and seaweed. Joni spotted the crow with its strange, clergy-like collar perched high in the tree, its beady eyes fixed on her. She realized it was the same one that had swooped down to drink the blood, lingering ever since, watching her from above. Still, she kept that unsettling thought to herself. Charles and Robin had arrived, their boat scraping against the rocks. "There's nowhere to run now," Charles said, stepping out of the boat menacingly. Charles jumped into the water, hastening toward shore, his soaked clothes clinging to his frame as he waded toward Jerry and Richard. His expression was set and determined. There would be no backing down now. Then, something moved within the water. It was slow and methodical. 2 monstrous tentacles emerged, then moved forward behind Robin, who was still trying to get out of the boat. They lurked, silently curling and coiling. The others weren't looking at Charles anymore. Their faces had gone rigid, eyes wide in horror. Charles hesitated, his fists loosening ever so slightly. "What?" he asked. The group pointed to Robin, and he turned sharply to see the Kraken's tentacles spring forward, latching onto him and coiling around him like unrelenting steel cables. With a sickening twist, they rip him apart in opposite directions, sending blood and entrails into the air. The tentacles retract, but only for a moment. Another monstrous appendage surged from the abyss, smashing the lifeboats to splinters as if they were brittle wood. Panic surges through the group. Then, the first drops fall. It's not water, but blood. It begins to pour down, painting the perpetual twilight in red. The Kraken isn't finished. A slick, gleaming tentacle rises slowly from the dark waters again, snapping upward to aim for Gloria. She dodges at the last second, but slips on the wet ground. But Jerry rushes to her side, pulling her to her feet. Soaked in red, they ran, desperate for cover and distance from the creature. When they finally stopped within the forest to catch their breath, the trees wept crimson, and the branches sagged under the weight of the grotesque downpour. Joni caught a few drops in her hand, whispering, "When the veil between worlds is broken, blood will flow, relentless and unyielding." "What did you say?" Gloria asked, unnerved. "It was a passage in the book," Joni replied. "What the hell was that? That couldn't have been real," Charles said, shaking his head. The cawing of crows filled the air. Joni looked up to see a murder of them gathered in the trees, watching closely. The clergy-collared crow was amongst them. "That thing just ripped him apart," Richard said in between breaths. "What do we do now?" Gloria asked. "We have no boat, and if we did, there's a sea monster out there. After that, I don't want to know what was flying above us," Richard muttered. "Let's find cover," he suggested as he began to walk. As they moved deeper into the trees, Gloria stopped abruptly. "Look, there's that person again." She pointed through the trees toward a dark figure. They called out, but the figure vanished within the brush. Suddenly, the rustling of something unseen rushed toward them, branches snapping in its wake. Charles grabbed a branch and raised it in defense. Then a man burst from the shadows. It was Javier, the busker. Joni and Gloria had met him while in Mexico. His clothes were soaked in blood, his breath ragged, and he looked terrified. "This way!" he urged. "They're coming!" "What's coming?" Charles demanded. Joni recognized him. "Javier?" He didn't wait for pleasantries. "There's a cabin just on the other side of the twisted bridge. We can talk in there." From the depths of the forest, the sound of dozens of tiny footsteps echoed. The murder of crows cawed in unison. It seemed like they were giving a warning of what was coming. Jerry was already moving. "Screw this. I'm taking my chances with him." Joni stole one last glance at the crows before following the others. The twisted iron bridge loomed ahead, silhouetted against the perpetual twilight. The air around it was thick with dampness, carrying the metallic scent of old rust. Beneath, a muddy ditch stretched across the path, its banks slick with the recent downpour of blood that continued to seep into the earth. Jerry helped Gloria up the bank. "This bridge, it's the same one from the fair," she said, struggling to find her grip in the slick mud and grass. Richard shook his head, brushing the thought aside. "Nonsense. There are bridges everywhere." With a grunt, he pulled her up. But Gloria felt it in her bones that this place wasn't just familiar. It was waiting for them. As they ventured forward, they came upon the remnants of an old fairground, now abandoned and swallowed by time. The Indian outpost sat at the edge of the grounds, and the aged wooden structure creaked under its own weight as a man sat in a rocking chair. Joni hesitated before approaching. "Excuse me," she whispered, her voice cautious, but there was no response. She nudged the man gently, only for his head to roll back lifelessly, revealing hollow sockets where his eyes should have been. His skin had shriveled like ancient parchment. A strangled gasp escaped her lips. Panic surged through her as she staggered backward before turning and fleeing from the grotesque sight. The rain had finally ceased by the time the group reached a lone cabin. The structure continued to stand in eerie silence, untouched by the world beyond its decayed walls. Dust clung to every surface, thick and undisturbed. The charred remains of a barn rest nearby, looking like it was lost with time. This was once the site of the massacre. If you listen closely, the faint screams of burning victims reverberate through the scorched timbers. Atop the barn, the spiral symbol remained etched into the blackened wood. Even the fire couldn't erase the mark of the evil priest's twisted faith. "Okay, we should be safe now," Javier said as he slammed the door shut, glancing around warily. "There's something in those woods. I can hear them surrounding me, but I can't see them. There's something in the water, too, and we heard something big flying over us," Richard added grimly. Joni looked around, confused. "Where are we?" Javier shook his head, gripping a knife tightly. "I don't know, but I think we're in some type of labyrinth or an alternate universe." Gloria stepped forward, her expression tense. "Didn't you hear us calling you?" Javier nodded. "I heard shouting, but whoever you saw, that wasn't me. That was the Shadow Man. I think he's a ghost or something." Charles noticed the man's knife on his hip and held out his hand. "Can I borrow that knife?" Interrupting the conversation. The others got nervous at the request, thinking the altercation wasn't over. Javier passed the item to him, and Charles began sharpening his stick that he refused to let go of. "It's the only explanation I have," Javier continued. Joni studied him carefully. "How did you get here?" "The next day after I met you girls." He then began to explain the best he could. Javier sat on a weathered wooden box at the corner of a bustling alleyway, his guitar slung across his lap. He strummed a soulful tune, his open guitar case at his feet, already sprinkled with coins. Pedestrians strolled past, some tossing change without breaking stride. Nearby, a stray dog lapped at a shallow puddle of murky water. It stiffened suddenly, ears twitching, before backing away with a low growl. A sharp bark followed, then a yelp, before the dog bolted down the alley, disappearing into the chaos of the street. Javier paused mid-chord. Curiosity sparked in him. He set his guitar aside and crouched beside the puddle. The water shimmered unnaturally, like an oily rainbow, pulsing with flickers of light. It seemed endless, impossibly deep. He hesitated, then dipped his hand into the water. His fingers vanished beneath the surface. His balance shifted and he toppled forward, and the water swallowed him whole. Javier hit the ground hard, knocking the breath from his lungs. In between gasps, he heard something. Children's footsteps surrounding him. He pushed himself up, scanning the eerie twilight landscape. The footsteps stopped, but he knew he wasn't alone. "Hello?" he called, his voice breaking the silence. "Is somebody there?" The vegetation shifted around him. Without thinking, he took off running. He came to a clearing with the twisted iron bridge and didn't notice the ditch ahead, He stumbled, plunging face first into the mud. As he struggled, he sank deeper. Panic clawed at his chest. Then, suddenly, the evil priest, in a shadowed figure, appeared in front of him, and Javier reached out. The figure grabbed hold, and in the blink of an eye, Javier was on solid ground again, and the shadow figure was gone. Breathing heavily, he barely had time to recover before he heard something above him. A massive shadow soared across the sky. Looking up, he was met with a terrifying sight. It was a Camazotz. The creature was from Mexican folklore. A monstrous bat with hollow eyes and a mouth full of vampire-like teeth. Its skeletal wings stretched wide, lined with human bones. The creature noticed Javier, and it circled back. He ran and found the cabin just as the Camazotz swooped in. Inside, he slammed the door shut, leaning against it, his chest heaving. Then he heard them again, the children's footsteps. They stopped outside the door, then scattered in all directions before fading into silence. Looking out the window, he spotted what was making the noise. It was a bear of Montaka. This was a Native American story made up to scare children away from the forest. Nothing existed. These creatures were jet black with mangy fur, and their appearance resembled a red panda. Its oversized teeth glinted in the twilight. It walked on its hind legs but could drop to all fours in an instant. When in attack mode, its fur peeled away, leaving it looking inside out. The creature turned. It raised one clawed paw and waved before it dropped to all fours and vanished into the trees. Javier finished his story as he peered out the window. Then I heard you guys screaming and came to find you. I think this place feeds off our imagination, or our fears. That Camazotz, it's from Mexican folklore. When I was a kid, I was terrified of that bat creature. My siblings used to tease me about it. I had so many sleepless nights, convinced it would come and take me away. Charles, still sharpening his stick, nodded. The bears of Montaka are mystical creatures. It's a made-up story from the elders, meant to keep children from wandering into the woods alone. Robin was always afraid of sea monsters, especially giant squids and octopuses, and he was killed by one. Gloria crossed her arms. Whatever's going on here, there has to be more to it. The book, Joni stated. She flung off her bag, retrieving Father McNaught's book. That could help us? Gloria said, leaning in. Joni flipped through the pages. One passage caught her eye. If you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. She turned the page, reading aloud. Other worlds. Each is a pulse in the heartbeat of the greater unknown. Their ways are not ours. They sing in frequencies felt, not heard, each forging their own path, their own laws, untouched by human will. And yet they call to us from our worst dreams. She flipped further. Another passage stood out. In these realms beyond, imagination is the compass. A thought becomes a bridge, a dream, a path. Each universe bends slightly to the subconscious, but only in hints, whispers. We wander unknowingly, shifting their patterns as they shift ours. Her hands trembled as she turned to the final passage. Each world has its own behavior, its own desire. Some will soothe, others will challenge, while others will consume. To understand them is to lose oneself. To forget them is to wander and be lost forever. I will live on between the realms, passing through like a ghost who has been forgotten, and live through the stories they will tell, until my time is up, and it's passed on to the next of kin. Next to the phrase was a distinctive last name, Nelson, her mother's maiden name. She slammed the book shut. As the book closed, crows began to hurl themselves against the cabin door. One perched on the windowsill, watching them. This was the one who wore the clergy collar. Jerry moved to the window, coming face to face with the bird before it flew off. His gaze shifted further into the trees. The shadow of the evil priest was there, watching them. "Guys, that shadow man's back," Jerry said, his voice unsteady. The group rushed to the window. "I think we should stay here for the night," Richard suggested. "Once it gets light, we'll find a way out."
Javier frowned. "That's the problem. It never gets light. It's like this all the time."
Jerry exhaled sharply, stepping away from the window. "This is getting too weird. I'm going to make myself useful and see if I can find anything."
Gloria got up.
"I'll come with you."
Javier shook his head. "There's nothing. I've already looked."
Chapter 11. A Dreamful Insight.
Joni lay nestled against Richard's shoulder, the subtle rise and fall of his breath grounding her in a sense of safety. Yet behind her closed eyes, sleep was anything but peaceful.
Flickering images surged through her mind, fragmented and jarring.
Like someone flipping through someone else's memories. In those flashes there was a presence, familiar and unsettling. It felt as though Father McNaught himself was offering up pieces of his past, not through words, but through impressions seated deep within her dreams. The first vision came with a jarring jolt, enveloping her entirely. She was now in a dark, cramped space, the air thick and still. The confessional booth reeled with the sharp scent of old wood and melted candle wax. Father McNaught shifted, his heavy robes rustling as he listened for the whisper of hesitant souls seeking absolution. Then the voice of a mysterious man in a cloak came. "Father, do you believe in heaven?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. His tone was uncanny, echoing the priest's voice with perfect precision. Every pause, every inflection, every sacred cadence replicated flawlessly. It was as though the priest himself had spoken, yet the figure remained hidden, his face obscured beneath the hood. Father McNaught stiffened.
Yes.
"And hell?" His fingers unconsciously tightened around the crucifix beneath his robe.
I have spent my life warning souls against it.
The silence stretched, then the man asked, "And the worlds in between ours?" A chill crept through the priest's spine.
There are no such worlds.
The man exhaled a low chuckle, a sound that sent ripples through the quiet. "You only say that because you haven't seen them."
He cut the fabric that separated them. Father McNaught's about to express himself about the damage, but he sees the truth behind the man's eyes.
"Give me your hand," the man commanded. The priest obeyed, trembling. The blade traced across his palm, and though he flinched, the man held tight. The man's lips moved, whispering words that seemed older than the stones around them. "By the tides that shift in unseen grace, and by stars where shadows flow." Father McNaught clutched the wooden seat, knuckles white. The incantation reverberated through the chamber, heavy with meaning he could not grasp, yet his soul recoiled as if it understood. Let realms diverge, then worlds embrace. Let gates swing wide to the gloam. He tried to pull his hand away, but the cloaked man's grip was iron. A strange sensation stirred, something sharp pecking at the cut, as though feeding from the blood itself. A sudden squawk tore through the silence. The priest's head snapped toward the sound, and the man's voice seemed to fade into the walls. Father McNaught rushed outside, his heart pounding, only to find emptiness. Though a lone crow perched nearby, its beak was slick and darkened from its feast. The mysterious man repeated himself, but his voice stretched thin, distant, echoing as though carried from beyond the veil. The air thickened, pressing against the priest's chest, and the candle flames bent low, straining toward the unseen. The priest ran outside and found himself outside the building's walls. Beyond the thick stone of the church, crows erupted into frenzied flight, their black wings blotting out the sunset. Father McNaught looked in the birds' direction while in their frenzy. It was a sign, but for what he didn't know at that moment. He heard the man speak one final time, his voice drifting as though borne upon the wind. Through hidden paths, through secret streams, where time itself has waned. Right after Father McNaught began to have visions of the sea, and the curtain that shimmered to bring him into the hidden place. He drifted on a small rowboat across a slate-gray sea, his eyes red from staring too long at the sky. Until one morning the shimmer came. It split the horizon like silver oil on water. No fanfare and no thunder. Just a presence, an opening stitched into the world, and he rode right into it. He would change after that. He rambled in sermons about shimmering doorways, about thin places in the world, places where time bent like light in water. He sketched cryptic diagrams on parchment and spoke of reflections that moved when you didn't. He tried to warn them of what was out there and what could consume them, but nobody listened. The congregation turned, and the whispers became meetings. The bishop paid a visit and stripped him of his collar. He said he'd lost his mind. Father McNaught disappeared not long after. After he was forced from the church, Father McNaught arrived on shore once again in his little rowboat. Noticing a shadow figure that resembled him quite well walking through the forest, he followed until he came upon a cabin. Looking over, he noticed a barn. His first thought, he has found his new church. The shadow figure walked into the cabin. Father McNaught proceeded with caution as he entered the unknown structure. The old wood groaned beneath him, and dust hung in frozen motes. The window revealed no view. Then he saw himself, or a version, sitting in the corner at a desk, quill scratching parchment feverishly in a back room, writing the book, his book. Then that version stood, and walked out of the room, vanishing before his eyes. Father McNaught stepped forward, and the floor gave way beneath him. Looking down, he found that book beneath the floorboards as if it were waiting for him to be found. When he opened the brittle pages of the old book, his eyes froze upon a name etched in fading ink. Nelson. It was his mother's maiden name. The entry spoke of Judge Nathaniel Nelson, who presided over the Salem witch trials. It was written that the judge sentenced a woman accused of witchcraft to death. Before the gallows claimed her, she cursed him, cursed his soul to eternal damnation, and decreed that the weight of his judgment would pass down through blood, binding itself to the most vulnerable next of kin. As a child, he had heard whispers of an ancestor who beat the witches, yet the family name was long forgotten, erased from the history books after the curse drove him insane and never to be seen again, a truth the church concealed to prevent panic. Now, staring at the inked words, he felt the weight of history pressing against him. The curse was not forgotten. It had survived centuries, carried silently through generations, waiting for him. The realm had spoken, and in that moment, he realized the past was not dead. It was alive, breathing through his bloodline, demanding reckoning. This must have been the mysterious man he had seen, and the writing was his. The ink shimmered briefly, then began to fade, vanishing from the page as though swallowed by time itself. At last, the book lay open and waiting. It was Father McNaught's turn to inscribe his words, now that Nathaniel had been released. The sound of crows caught his attention. Looking outside, he saw crows flying in their pattern. A whisper tells him to go forth and enter the vortex, so with the book in his hand, he hastens towards them and walks into their murmuration. There's a soft shift, like falling through memory. And he was home, back on his ship, preaching of a new world to his followers. It was as if his life continued while he was in the realm, another him carrying on with his life. Only now he was changed, and the realm began to follow him. He began to speak, and the people listened. It started with only one, then 2, then a dozen, and it multiplied from there. Who knows how long he was gone? He didn't get hungry or thirsty, tired or sick. It was just him in the now, in that unknown place. Father McNaught showed them the shimmer, read from the book, and taught them the passages. He spoke of the tides and the ripples within our worlds that he had seen, but he refrained from telling them how they could exit or showing them inside until they were ready and believed. Time had passed, and then one day his ship cut through the fog. Aboard it, Father McNaught stood with the others in white robes, worn like ancient banners. His followers surrounded him, silent, their eyes full of reverence. His voice echoed across the deck, low and commanding to the newcomers.
When you pass through, there may be echoes or things that follow.
He then looked to the sky. Crows wheeled above.
When you return home, do not engage with them. Do not fear them. They are ripples, just ripples. Keep your eyes forward and your soul anchored.
Nobody knew what he actually meant. They would have to enter this mysterious place and its truths for them to understand. He lifted the book, and the shimmer awaited. He ordered his followers to drop the anchor and get the lifeboats ready. The world awaited them. There's a quick time flash, and the priest is seen standing with his two loyal followers, Brother Callum and Sister Eloise, as the rest of the congregation entered the barn for the sermon. The priest whispered to his loyal followers, and they nodded, acknowledging his request. "We do this for you," Brother Callum said. "We do this for the realm," Sister Eloise added. They exchanged uneasy glances, their faces hidden in the flickering light as they entered the space. They looked at each other and, in one swift and synchronized motion, they hurled the lanterns to the floor. The glass shattered, spilling oil that quickly ignited in an eruption of flames, the roar of fire deafening. The flames spread rapidly, crawling across the floor with merciless speed. Screams filled the air as the fire surged, consuming everything in its path. The heat slammed into the crowd, forcing them back as smoke began to fill the space. Panic erupted among them, their movements erratic and chaotic as they scrambled for escape. But the door was locked. Father McNaught began to preach as the barn became engulfed in flames, his voice cold and commanding. Outside, in the eerie twilight, the evil priest stood, his posture calm and resolute, as though the scene inside was nothing more than a ritual. He ignored the muffled cries of the trapped souls that echoed faintly, the sound growing distant as the smoke began to pour from the barn. Slowly, the screams faded into silence.
In the name of those who walked this path before, with their lives extinguished and their whispers lingering, we summon fire, ravenous, unyielding, to devour the veil and consume the soul's remains. In the suffocating dark, let the embers seethe, their heat biting as they mark the passage. Let the flames rise, unforgiving and raw, to tear the spirit free from flesh and time. Fire does not cleanse, it devours. Fire does not guide, it claims. Surrender to its hunger as the boundaries dissolve, and step into the abyss beyond sight, where warmth is fleeting and silence screams.
Father McNaught noticed the crows wheeling in murmuration. As he spoke his final words, it was time for him to go. He stepped into its swirling heart and was swallowed whole just as the screams from the burning barns fell into silence. When Father McNaught emerged from the ethereal realm, his mind was burdened with the weight of secrets too vast for the world to bear. With trembling hands, he concealed the ancient tome beneath the creaking floorboards of his ship, the wood groaning softly as if protesting the relic's presence. That night, an ominous chill swept through the vessel, and from the corner of his eye, Father McNaught saw a shadow figure that resembled himself, flickering in the dim lantern light. It moved with purpose, gliding through the ship's labyrinthine corridors. Compelled by a force beyond reason, he followed. Your time in this world wanes. The realms call for their shepherd. The tides will guide the seed of your purpose to the child of the blood. The moment of passing on shall be known in time. Morning came, but Father McNaught was gone. His ship was later discovered eerily adrift, anchored in the heart of the ocean. Mariners whispered of its haunting aura, its decks worn but untouched by time. Salvagers took hold of the vessel, salvaging what they could, yet its timber seemed alive, infused with an uncanny presence. Salvaging its remains, they constructed another ship. This ship was the vessel Joni was currently on.
Chapter 12. The Realm Whispers.
Joni jolted awake, gasping for breath. Gloria's voice, muffled but frantic, reached her ears.
Joni! Joni!
Her eyes fluttered open, still trapped in the nightmare. She could feel the weight of the vision lingering, the images of the priest still fresh in her mind. You just had a bad dream. Gloria comforted Joni as she woke. Joni sat upright, her voice trembling as she broke the silence. That wasn't just a dream. It was a vivid nightmare, more real than I care to admit. I saw everything, every haunting detail as if I were there. I think the universe thrives on fear, feeding off what we dread most or conjuring new terrors to ensnare us. This fear, twisted and relentless, strengthens the priest, granting him the power to traverse the boundaries between worlds. She then looked to Richard. The story you told us about him was true. How did you know? Richard looked in confusion. It just all popped into my head. I was making it up. I thought you said you heard it from a friend of yours, Gloria chimed in. I was invested in the story. I was trying to scare you girls. He wanted me to know. He wants something. She hid the fact of her family name in fear that they would turn against her. I say we find a way to get out of this place and find a way back home. I haven't heard or seen anything. Is it safe? Charles mentioned while keeping his focus outside and towards the forest, every so often pacing around the room. We could make a boat, Javier mentioned. No way am I going back out on the water after whatever that was that ripped his friend apart. Gloria made her voice heard. I don't think we're safe anywhere. We have to take a chance, Jerry said to Gloria, who had become visibly shaken over the idea presented. Gloria perked up, coming across a thought. The book. What happens if we destroy it? She rummages through Joni's bag before finding it. She then tries to rip a page, but it won't tear. Instead, she gets a small paper cut. Jerry tries, but he can't either. Charles retrieved his Zippo and puts the flame to the page, but it won't burn. There's no use. Jerry tossed the book aside. Joni picked it up and put it back into her bag. Charles, now sick of being held up in the cabin, walks to the door. We've waited long enough. Come on, let's get out of here. He opened the door to see multiple crows dead at his feet. He stepped over them, and then he looked down and poked one with his spear. This is a good omen. Symbolizes good luck and wisdom. But they're dead, Gloria said, while she stepped with caution over the corpses. Charles pointed out into the distance. Not all of them. He pointed out the trees. They look in the distance to see hundreds of crows blanketing the trees. It's as if they are watching them. Evil priests become crows. Evil nuns become magpies. Joni remembered her grandfather's words. You say something? Richard asked. Nothing, just something my grandfather said to me before I left. She replied as she began to think that this particular crow could actually a manifestation of the priest. Richard looked to Javier. It seemed that he knew more about the land than they did. Where do you think we should go? Before Javier could speak, the whooshing noise had returned, but this time it sounded faster and louder. At that same moment, scurrying within the forest also caught their attention. Out of the shadows, the Camazotz swooped down and grabbed Javier by his shoulders. The bat begins to lift off, but the others run and grab Javier's legs, and a struggle ensues. Charles gets into position to throw the spear, but he doesn't have a clear shot. With every pull, the creature's talons dig deeper into Javier's body until they tear his shoulders away. Charles has a clear shot and throws his spear like a javelin, striking the creature in the heart. The creature falls to the ground, flopping as it struggles to get back to its feet before it eventually dies from its injury. Javier is in a lot of pain. With everyone attending to Javier's severe injuries, Charles retrieves his spear. Hearing the scampering and scurrying again, Charles turns to see 6 bears of Montaka standing just outside the tree line. Guys, we have another problem. The group turned and became terrified by what they saw. Impulsively, they take off running, leaving Javier to die alone. Joni stopped and called to the rest of the group. We can't just leave him. Jerry, in his terrified state, noticed the barn and runs to seek shelter inside. "In here!" Everyone retreated to the barn. Jerry and Richard struggled to open the door. As they wait, Joni looked behind her to see the tribe of the bears dragging Javier and the Camazots off into the forest. Javier's screams echo before he becomes silent. Jerry opens the door, and the group begins to enter, but stops dead in their tracks. The charred remains of the priest's congregation lay in a pile of bone and ash, the interior wood charred and scorched. The group burst out of the structure and through the thicket, their breath ragged, branches clawing at their sleeves. The forest gave way to sand and stone, and suddenly they were back on the shore. Perched on a driftwood stump, silhouetted against the bruised sky, was the crow, the one with the white clergy collar, its head tilted slightly, eyes locked on Joni. It cawed, not loud or urgent. Joni's chest tightened, and a memory surged. She was 10, kneeling beside the box of orphaned fledglings. One had a strange white ring of feathers around its neck. She fed them soaked bread, whispered lullabies, and kept them warm with her own blankets. And then, the day she left for the trip, the crows had gathered. Dozens, silent, watching from the wires, the trees, and the neighbors' rooftops as she packed her belongings in the car. She'd now felt it then, an invisible thread, a warning, a promise of what was her fate. Now, years later, the collared crow was here. It wasn't just a bird. It was a witness, maybe even a sentinel, a descendant of the ones she'd tried to save. Crows remembered. They passed stories down. They knew who had hurt them and who had helped. Joni swallowed hard. The crow blinked once, then lifted into the air, wings slicing the dusk. It circled once, then vanished into the trees. Suddenly, a deafening crack broke the silence. The kraken's tentacles burst from the murky depths. They coil around a tree and uproot it. The earth lifts around Jerry, and he's thrown backward, his body slamming into the ground. He's helped to his feet as the trees dragged into the churning water, vanishing in seconds. Charles, at another tentacle, brandished his spear. He shouted as he thrust it into the tentacle, each jab barely slowing the monstrous creature down. The group bolts back into the forest. Behind them, the tentacles lash out, tearing through the trees. Massive branches crash around them. The earth trembles as trees are ripped from their roots. The appendages whip dangerously close, narrowly missing the fleeing group. Charles is struck by a falling branch but pushes forward, blood streaking his face. They are out of harm's way, and they stumble through the dense foliage as the creature's roars echo in the distance. Then, out of nowhere, blood again fell from the sky. Joni noticed the twisted bridge up ahead. She directed them to seek cover under it. The air was dense, pressing in on the small group huddled together, as if the weight of the realm itself was suffocating them. Jerry and Gloria sat apart from Richard and Joni, their faces etched with worry. Jerry gently wiped Gloria's tears as she rested against him, her sorrow unspoken, but heavy and easily sensed. Charles stood vigil, his eyes scanning the surrounding vicinity. The crow with the clergy collar soars from the forest before it lands on the debris underneath the bridge, and not far from everyone. It lets out a lengthy caw, as if it were warning Joni again. Richard tries to shoo the bird away, but it stands its ground, staring unblinkingly back at him. Joni broke down and yelled at the bird. "What do you want from us?" Richard hugs her. Jerry cleared his throat as he held Gloria, hesitant about what he wanted to say next. "I need to tell you something. I feel this is all mine, and Richard's fault." Jerry's conscience got the best of him. He couldn't hold on to the secret any longer. "Why would you say that? Of course it's not. How were you supposed to know?" Gloria sympathetically replied. Joni, her grief overwhelming her, finally looked up at Richard and moved in for a kiss. But she fell upon something unexpected as she wrapped her hands around him, her missing boat tickets sticking out from Richard's back pocket. She seized them, her fingers trembling with sudden fury. "What's this?" she demanded, her voice cracking. The commotion drew Gloria's attention, her eyes wide with confusion. Panic flickered across Richard's face, and he rushed to explain, but Joni was already too far gone in her fury. "You knew about this, Jerry?" Gloria asked, her gaze piercing, accusing. Jerry stood frozen, unable to answer, the weight of the situation crashing down on him. "They had our tickets this whole time," Joni repeated, her voice low, like a whisper of betrayal. Richard scrambled to make sense of the situation. "I can explain," he stammered, reaching for Joni, but she pushed him away, her anger a protective shield. "You were going to throw them away, weren't you?" Jerry finally muttered, glancing guiltily at both women. "I did throw them away on the boat," Richard said quickly. "That's what I don't get." Jerry's face hardened. "He's trying to separate us. We'll be more vulnerable if we—" Before he could finish, Charles's voice broke through the tension. "Hey, guys!" Charles's shout was urgent, but it barely registered with the others. "Guys!" His tone was more forceful this time. All eyes snapped to him, stopping the argument. Their expressions turned to one of horror as Charles pointed to the looming figures of the bears of Montaka, towering on their hind legs, their clawed paws raised in a chilling wave. Charles struggled to hold back the encroaching bears. They lumbered and crept closer, growling low, a sound that vibrated through the ground. In a defensive stance, Charles frantically waves his stick, desperation in his every motion. The bears pause momentarily, dropping to all fours. Their fur begins to split and peel away, wet chunks sloughing to the ground. Beneath the fur, raw muscle and glistening sinew pulse, their snarls growing guttural. They stand again, transformed, monstrous and inside out, their grotesque bodies steaming in the cold air. "We need to get out of here," Richard gasped, but his words barely left his mouth before the evil priest was upon them. With a fluid motion, the priest reached out, grabbing Richard by the throat and lifting him from the ground effortlessly. Joni sprinted forward, her heart pounding as she called out, "Let him go!" But before she could reach him, the priest flicked his wrist, sending Joni hurtling back. She crashed to the ground, dazed and breathless. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. "Go to the crows, woman." The priest's mouth opened unnaturally wide, a cloud of gray mist flowing from Richard's withering body. In moments, Richard's flesh turned to ash, scattering in the wind like dust. The air exploded with the shrieking cries of hundreds of crows, their wings filling the sky like a black storm. They swooped down upon the bears, a flurry of feathers and talons. But the crows didn't escape unscathed. Stripped of their feathers, they fell in midair, their skeletal remains dropping to the earth. But the bears faltered, their snarls drowned out by the ceaseless swarm. The crows suddenly shifted direction, their mass spinning like a vortex around the priest. Joni watched as the crows swirl around him as he began to vanish. Without thinking, Joni bolted toward the chaotic mass, the crows parting to let her through. "The crows!" she shouted. "It's our way out, come on!" She disappeared into the darkness of the murmuring flock. Jerry, Charles, and Gloria followed close behind, vanishing within the suffocating swirl of wings.
Chapter 13. When the Realm Bleeds Over.
As they departed, the world tilted, subtly, irrevocably. Joni clawed her way out of the mattress, expelling her from the realm's depths. Thin scratches from the mattress's springs traced her skin, souvenirs of the struggle. She emerged gasping, her face etched with profound relief, like someone surfacing from a dream too vivid to be fiction, too cruel to be forgotten. The crow with the clergy collar was there to greet her. It perched on her headboard, letting out a screech before flying out the window. In the cargo bay, the silence of the ship was broken by the sound of a net crashing to the floor. A groan of pain sounded from within as Charles, disoriented, crawled free. He paused, breathing heavily, his surroundings familiar. Faint knocks echoed in the stillness, drawing Charles's attention. The sound grew louder, more desperate, coming from a nearby coffin. He approached cautiously, his heart thudding in his chest. "Hello? Is someone in there?" he called, his voice shaky. Then the knocking intensified, turning into frantic pounding. Charles stumbled back in alarm, his mind racing. He found a crowbar nearby and returned to the coffin, prying open the lid with strained effort. What he saw inside froze him in place. The body of the old Indian lay inside, decomposed, hollow eyes staring up at him. And then, his arm shot upward, grabbing Charles with unnatural strength. The corpse dragged him back into the coffin, the lid snapping shut with a violent motion. Whistling is heard off in the distance before the safe master came into view. He looks around, writing on his clipboard before leaving the area. Also aboard the ship, Jerry awoke freezing and disoriented to find himself stuck in a chest freezer, his breath misting in the cold air. He tries to lift the lid, but it's locked from the outside. The faint sound of pounding echoed from within the freezer, a noise that grew louder by the second, but nobody could hear him. Jerry's eyes darted around, his panic escalating. Joni hadn't spoken to Gloria in weeks. Gloria had been found wandering along a country road, disoriented and unable to remember anything about herself. She was admitted to a psychiatric facility soon after. Her eyes had grown hollow, her speech erratic if the realm itself had left its fingerprints on her mind. Joni tried to visit, but Gloria was always too frantic for company. The realm hadn't released her. It had seeped into her reality, and now it was devouring her sanity behind the hospital walls. One day, while rummaging in the garage for old Halloween decorations, Joni came across her Duluth bag. Inside were the book, a figurine, and 2 rolls of film. She knew the book had to be destroyed, but when she tried to tear its pages, they wouldn't rip. And it was quickly realized that the evil priest's words had all vanished, just blank pages. Then the light hit the page, and she noticed faint indentations where words had been. When she scratched her pencil across the page, the hidden letters emerged, bearing an eerie resemblance to her own handwriting. The discovery was jarring. She had no memory of writing in the book. Where did the original writing go, and why had her own memory of it vanished? The words revealed a terrible truth. The crow with the clergy collar chooses the next of kin, the most vulnerable. It was never a protector. It was always watching. It was the murder of crows that were giving the warning. But the crow with the clergy collar seemed to be the dominant one, and was able to influence the others. The murmuration was them breaking free. She then wondered when the crows were swirling around the priest, and they escaped, that the crows were actually attacking and killing him. But they disrupted the process. Then it struck her that water might be the key to ending it. The pages refused to burn or tear, and with the priest always at sea and him preaching the words during his baptism, the answer had to lie there. Maybe the priest had to drown if the realm was ever to loosen its grip. Perhaps Gloria could be freed. She could only hope the others were safe, but if they were already trapped, the book could also release the realm's grip on them. It had to leave its host through death before it could re-enter the realm. Finding a lockbox, she sealed the book inside, wrapped it in chains, and drove toward the lake. A bridge loomed ahead, slick with rain and shadow. Her fingers gripped the wheel, knuckles white. She knew this had to end, and then out of nowhere the priest emerged in the center of the road. She swerved, tires shrieking against the wet pavement. The car slammed into the railing, twisted, and plunged into the lake below. Water rushed in, her lungs burned, and her vision dimmed. The last thing she saw was the lockbox, still sealed, sinking beside her into the abyss. She woke days later in the hospital, her arm and leg broken, lacerations marking her face, her body covered in cuts and bruises. Joni had died and then returned. The realm did not understand resurrection. It had been undone by a loophole it could not comprehend, or so she believed. She believed it because there had been no sign of the realm, no whisper of the priest, nothing at all. She began to wonder if the others were okay, and if the realm had released its grip on them.
Gloria hadn't come to visit. Perhaps she just needed time.
Or maybe it had all been nothing more than a dream she'd conjured while in her coma. But when she returned home, she found the book on her dresser, the book out of its lockbox. She stared at it, her heart thumping. She now knew it couldn't be destroyed, but it could be contained. The priest had left it for someone to find. Maybe she could do the same for eternity. Though over time it was forgotten, and the burden once again fell on the bloodline. Sometimes, whispers curled through the vents, but Joni had learned to ignore them. The book remained closed, and as long as it did, the priest stayed buried, waiting for his time to pass the torch. Not long after she arrived home, Joni would receive a call. "Hello?" She answered. There was only the sound of heavy breathing, momentarily filling the space with tension. She knew that sound all too well.
"Gloria, is that you?"
Joni asked. A voice finally cut the silence. "It's happening again, Joni." Gloria's voice trembled. "I can't tell if it's in my head or if I keep going back there. It left for a bit, but now it's back." Gloria's voice began to crackle through the phone line, muffled and distorted by static, each word sounding more distant than the last. Gloria's voice came through again, barely audible as the phone line began to falter. "I guess you finally got your thrill-seeking moment." Gloria's words were tinged with an unsettling mix of her own and the Irish accent of the priest. Joni, her heart pounding, pressed the phone closer to her ear.
"Pardon? Gloria, I can't hear you."
There was a moment of silence before Gloria's voice returned, this time trembling, almost panicked. "I can see him." Breathing quickly, Gloria's words became fractured, gasping for air as if her very life was being choked out of her. Then the phone went dead, leaving Joni with an eerie emptiness. "What do you see?" Joni's voice trembled, but all she heard was the dead silence of the line.
Chapter 14. Something Hidden.
Alexis sat alone in the spare room, the obituaries of Gloria and Jerry in her hand. Newspaper clippings of Richard, Robin, and Charles, each a missing persons report, lay on the floor in front of her. She flipped open the evil priest's book and stared at the exposed words, visible now thanks to the pencil rubbing. Instinctively she ran her hands over the page. A raw, blinding surge of information instantly flooded her mind, an overwhelming rush of memory that wasn't hers, or was it? In that moment she understood. It was Alexis who was in the realm, experiencing the exact events that Joni had, and it was Alexis who had written those words, pressing them into the very fabric of the book. The reason for the vanished memory became clear, echoing a crucial, terrifying truth. The realm exists outside of time. It holds no past, no future, and no present. Tucked between the leather lining of the cover, nearly invisible, was a folded sheet of parchment. She eased it out carefully. It was a family tree, and one name was circled, McNaught. Years after her escape, Joni learned that her dreams told the truth. The priest was in fact her ancestor, and the realm was a curse tied to their bloodline. Alongside the family tree was a photograph, pressed flat and hidden. It was Father McNaught, wearing a clerical robe, his posture rigid, and his expression composed, prim and proper, and almost regal. Alexis stared at the image. Something felt wrong, too perfect and too deliberate. From outside came the sound of pecking. She looked over to see the crow in its strange clergy collar, hammering at the brand-new pane that had just been replaced. Its beak struck the glass, cracking it into a spiderweb of fractures. Beyond the bird, she saw a murder gathered, an immense swirling mass, their wings slicing through the sky in an eerie formation. Without a second thought, she left the room and stepped outside. The crows swirled around her. The realm was calling to her, drawing her into their vortex. She moved forward, the birds parting as she disappeared into their depths. The moment she vanished, The birds scattered, flying in different directions. It was now 3 years later. Leland sat in the living room, watching the evening news. The image of Alexis appeared on the screen, her face frozen in time. A picture of the woman who had gone missing without a trace for the people who didn't know her. The news anchor's voice filled the room. Alexis Nelson, the California woman who went missing without a trace 3 years ago, has been found safe and is currently being treated at a local hospital. Her husband walked away from the television and toward the spare room. The door opened with a soft creak, and he flicked on the light. The room was eerily familiar, the spiral of pictures still visible on the floor, just as it had been in the past. The images of the missing persons, the obituaries, and the cryptic passages from the book were arranged in an unsettling pattern at the center of the room. The news anchor's voice continued, faintly heard from the living room. In other news, there are still no leads in the mysterious disappearance of the Rancourt family from Savannah, Georgia. Investigators still believe foul play was involved. The wife and mother, Rachel Rancourt, who is the prime suspect, remains unwilling to speak to authorities. The door clicked shut behind him, and he walked away, leaving the room and the mysteries it held behind him. Alexis had now spent years committed. She sat in the common room, her head tilted, a thick bandage covering her left eye, the mark of a wound she had carved into herself. The gauze was stark, a reminder of pain turned into ritual. When the nurses stepped out, silence fell. A handful of patients drifted toward her, drawn by something in her bearing. Alexis lifted her chin, her single, uncovered eye burning with intensity. "You feel it pressing against us, don't you?" she said, her voice low but magnetic. "The realm is here. It waits. And I can show you." Her words carried like a sermon, like the evil priest once spoke. "The realm and I are no longer apart. It breathes through me. It speaks through me. I am its vessel. Once I only glimpsed it. Now it is me, and I am it." She leaned forward, the bandage stark against her face. "The realm was, and I was, but now the realm is, and I am. We are one, and if you follow me, I can open the door." The patient stood transfixed, caught between awe and fear. Alexis preached with the certainty of someone who had crossed a threshold no one else could see. The end.